Chapter 1552. The unfixed heavenly revelation pavilion was a famous secret realm even in the four cardinal galaxies. It was especially beneficial for constellation realm cultivators. The heavenly revelation pavilion only opened once every 10 years, and only 3 people could enter at a time. In the past, only the most talented constellation realm cultivators in the unfixed realm had the right to enter. This time, Do Lang actually got a spot. Hua Qing knew that this was all thanks to Lu Yi. If it weren't for Lu Yi, Do Lang wouldn't have gotten such a good thing. He couldn't help but sigh in excitement. To think that he had spent his whole life in the unfixed realm, but in the end he didn't have as much face as a foreign cultivator. However, this couldn't be helped. Not everyone could grasp a safe route to the Wanxiang Sea. Hua Qing left the unfixed realm with a heavy heart, preparing to return to the Red Sky realm and send Do Lang over. At this moment, on the starboat that was sailing towards the outer reaches of indefinite, Kong Cheng apologized to Lu Yi with a serious expression and a smile on his face. "I didn't think things through just now and offended you. Please forgive me, young friend." "You're too kind. It's just a small matter," Lu Yi replied. Kong Cheng saw that he really didn't mean to blame him. Only then did his expression relax. He took out a storage ring. "Little friend, this is what the Realm Lord ordered me to prepare before we left. It's just some worthless things. Please accept it." Lu Yi didn't stand on ceremony. He reached out and took it. Using his divine sense, he found that the things inside were none other than colorful spiritual fruits. He understood. It seemed that Jiang Shang saw Ya's previous performance and specially ordered people to prepare gifts for her. These spiritual fruits were no doubt extraordinary. There were many varieties and quantities. It was impossible to say that they were worthless. Such a large pile of spiritual fruits was worth at least tens of thousands of spiritual jades. "The Realm Lord is too kind." Lu Yi nodded. The age gap between them and Jiang Shang was obvious. The reason why Jiang Shang had asked Kong Cheng to see him off was to give him a chance to apologize. Now that the matter had been settled, there wasn't much to talk about. Kong Cheng steered the starboat in silence, while Lu Yi placed the Panshan saber horizontally on his knees and entered the Cyan Hall to fight against Yan Shi. Yan Shi was undoubtedly very strong, but his entire body was as slippery as a loach. He flitted around the green hall, and Lu Yi could not even touch the corner of his clothes even after using all his strength. But if Yan Shi found an opportunity, it would be accompanied by a thunderous strike. Lu Yi could not help but gasp in amazement at Yan Shi's miraculous vertical sweep technique. He understood that if he wanted to get rid of Yan Shi and get past him, he would have to learn his vertical sweep technique. Otherwise, if he couldn't even hit him, how could he defeat him? Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. One day, when Lu Yi opened his eyes, Kong Cheng, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. "Young friend, we're about to leave Neverwinter." Under normal circumstances, with Lu Ye's speed, it would take more than 3 months to traverse a Pairon, but Kong Cheng was much faster. This was one of the reasons why Jiang Shang had Kong Cheng send Lu Yi off. They wanted Lu Yi to return to Jade Conch as soon as possible. When Lu Yi heard this, he looked up and saw some traces of buildings on a huge floating continent in front of him. Moreover, there were many cultivators active around the floating continent. As if sensing Lu Ye's confusion, Kong Cheng explained, "Ever since that hive drifted here a few decades ago, Apeiron has built a defensive frontier to guard against the invasion of the insect race. Now, 2 of Apeiron's Rizhao are overseeing it." Saying so, he steered the starboat toward the floating continent. It took them almost half a day to reach the floating continent. This floating continent looked like a fragment of a realm that had been broken for tens of thousands of years. It had been drifting in the starry sky just like that. Now, Apeiron's Rizhao had used some method to bind it here and turn it into a frontline fortress. Previously, Lu Yi had not seen much because of the floating continent, but when he got on the floating continent, Lu Yi discovered a strange sight in the starry sky. Tens of thousands of kilometers away in the starry sky, there was an oval-shaped object that looked like a beehive quietly standing there. At a glance, the beehive was at most the size of a fist, but considering the distance, Lu Yi estimated that it was at least the size of a planet. An insect hive. Lu Yi recognized the details of this thing at a glance. This completely overturned Lu Ye's understanding of insect hives. The insect hives he had seen before were basically all underground. Even if they were large, there was a limit to their size. However, the size of this hive was beyond his imagination. How was this an insect hive? It was more like a planet. However, it was different from ordinary planets. Under the control of the insect race, an insect hive like this could drift through the starry sky. If it encountered a realm with vitality, the insect race would swarm out in full force. Once the insect race left, the realm would also die. Even from a great distance, Lu Yi could see traces of a large number of insect race members entering and leaving the hive. Not only were there traces of insect race members around the hive, but they could also be seen everywhere in the nearby starry sky. In a sense, the insect race was even more dangerous than the blood race as one of the two greatest disasters in the starry sky. Due to the uniqueness of the insect hive, countless realms and planets with vitality had suffered as it roamed around. Under normal circumstances, no matter what race a cultivator was from, they would find a way to exterminate the blood tribe or the insect tribe when they encountered them in the starry sky. These two races were truly notorious and hated by everyone. However, after countless years, these two races had not been exterminated. The insectoid hive stood in front of Apeiron's door, eyeing it like a tiger watching its prey. Although there were no signs of invasion, anyone would feel uncomfortable with such a thing in front of their door. No one knew if the insectoid hive would suddenly invade Apeiron's system. Of the two Rizhao overseeing this place, only one remained here. The other had gone out to investigate the situation. Kong Cheng led Lu Yi to greet Rizhao. She was a woman with a cold expression. No one knew what she had encountered, but she was actually blind in one eye. Her left eye was covered with an eye patch, looking extremely strange. She should be a weapon cultivator because she was dressed very neatly and her aura was extremely sharp. Kong Cheng seemed to be in awe of her. After a while of telepathic communication, the woman looked at Lu Yi in surprise and then looked at the restless Yaya in Lu Ye's arms. If it weren't for Kong Cheng's words, she really couldn't see anything unusual about Yaya. But such an ordinary little girl, who didn't seem to have any traces of cultivation, was actually a Rizhao like her? The insect race has been a little restless recently. It won't be easy for you to cross the starry sky ahead. Even if you have Rizhao's protection, it will be troublesome if you accidentally expose your whereabouts. There are more than one Rizhao in the insect race. Lu Yi said, "Senior, please point out a suitable route." Although he could conceal himself, and the new concealment spiritual tattoo he deduced was more effective than before, Yaya couldn't. He had already tried to make Yaya conceal herself on the way here, but Yaya looked at him blankly, as if she didn't know what concealment was. Moreover, if she used concealment to fly, her speed would be far slower than the starboat, so Lu Yi felt that it was better to drive the starboat forward. Therefore, there must be a relatively safe route. This was also the reason why he followed Kong Cheng to visit Rizhao. Rizhao had been here for decades and undoubtedly knew the situation here very well. There is no suitable route. Now that the insect race's tentacles are everywhere, if you want to pass through here, I can't guarantee that you won't expose your whereabouts. At most, I can reduce the risk. That's enough. Lu Yi nodded. Rizhao didn't talk nonsense and immediately pointed out a route for Lu Yi. According to the information she received, the risk of being exposed was the lowest if he took this route. Even if he was exposed, it was unlikely that he would attract the attention of the insect race's Rizhao. "When do you leave?" Rizhao asked again. "I'm leaving now." Lu Yi replied. "Then let's go." Rizhao finished speaking and stepped out. Lu Yi and Kong Cheng looked at each other. Kong Cheng said, "Little friend, I can only send you this far. Please be careful on the road ahead." "Many thanks, Brother Kong." Lu Yi expressed his gratitude. Although the two of them didn't get along well the first time they met, Lu Yi didn't suffer any losses. Kong Cheng, on the other hand, had lost an arm. Now that the other party had escorted him all the way here, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't take the slight unpleasantness to heart. Lu Yi was just about to leave when he heard a cold shout from the depths of space, "Get out here, Lu Yi was startled because he recognized the voice as belonging to Ri Zhao. He didn't know what she was doing. However, Lu Yi soon realized what she was doing. Not long after her voice rang out, an extremely violent energy fluctuation came from the depths of space. Even from a great distance, one could feel the shock waves from the collision. It made one feel uneasy. Lu Yi and Kong Qing hurriedly flew out of the void continent and looked into the depths of space. There, they saw experts fighting and stirring up space. One of them was Hikari, and the other was Hikari of the Zerg race. Lu Yi was still feeling the power of the two Ri Zhao's attacks when Kong Qing urged, "Little friend, if you don't leave now, when are you going to leave?" Ri Zhao had provoked Ri Zhao of the insect race for no reason and even fought with him. Clearly, it wasn't on a whim. This was undoubtedly to create chaos and draw the attention of the insect race so that Lu Yi could leave safely. Lu Yi understood and didn't hesitate. He immediately summoned his planetary boat and flew into the depths of space according to the route Ri Zhao had given him. The journey was indeed peaceful. Half a day later, they could no longer feel the shockwaves from the battle behind them. Lu Yi sat upright on the planetary boat, Yaya was eating spirit fruits, and Li Shang was in charge of steering the boat. After hiding in Lu Ye's divine ocean for a few months, she could finally come out and take a breather. Lu Yi wasn't worried about passing through this part of space. With Yaya by his side, even if they were unlucky enough to encounter Ri Zhao of the insect race, they still had the power to fight back. End of chapter. Chapter 1553. Lu Yi did not place all his hopes on Yaya. Ever since she took action last time, Lu Yi had discovered a problem. Although Yaya was indeed as strong as Ri Zhao, there was clearly something wrong with her body. Once she took action, she would quickly fall into a weakened state and then fall into a deep sleep. Therefore, it was best to avoid her as much as possible. However, there were some troublesome matters that could not be avoided even if one wanted to, especially when Lu Yi did not conceal himself. Instead, he rode the planetary ship ostentatiously through the city. Although he followed Ri Zhao's guidance and took a route where there were fewer insectoids, he was still discovered by the insectoids. Less than half a day after leaving the floating continent where the indefinite frontline fortress was located, Lu Yi discovered that the insectoids were pursuing him from the side. These insectoids were at the constellation level, and their speed was far slower than the planetary ships. Therefore, they were soon left behind. As the planetary ship continued forward, it was like a small fish that had fallen into a shark's pond. No matter where it went, there were insectoids chasing after it from all directions. However, these insectoids were not as fast as the planetary ship, so their efforts were futile. In the end, they could only watch as the planetary ship disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. Occasionally, some scattered insectoids would hear the news and try to intercept them, but they would be scattered by the planetary ship. Those who did not dodge in time were likely to be killed on the spot. The insectoids were a very strange race. They had an extremely close and mysterious connection with the hives that gave birth to them. Therefore, the insectoids could use the hives to quickly spread the news without the need for transmission. With such convenience, as long as one insectoid discovered Lu Ye's planetary ship, it would be equivalent to the entire swarm discovering the planetary ship's whereabouts. Therefore, even if the insectoids failed to catch up to Lu Yi, the swarm would be able to block his path. Thanks to Ri Zhao's guidance, Lu Yi did not encounter any strong insectoids along the way, so the journey was quite smooth. A few days later, a dark cloud suddenly appeared in the starry sky ahead. Lu Yi looked over and found that it was not a dark cloud, but a dense swarm of insectoids. This surprised Lu Yi, because one had to have a constellation if they wanted to travel through the starry sky with their physical body. No matter how easy it was for the insectoids to breed and how fast they grew, it was impossible for them to have so many constellations. The insectoid constellations he had encountered before were all scattered. At most, there were 2 or 3 insectoids in a squad. There were at least tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of insectoids gathered in this dark cloud. How could an insectoid hive nurture so many constellations? With such strength, the insectoids could easily attack a Pyron and take her down. As if seeing Lu Ye's doubts, Li Shang opened his mouth and said, "The insect race has a very special physique, different from all the other races in the starry skies. If cultivators of other races want to survive in the starry skies, they must have a constellation, but some special insect races don't. They are born with the ability to resist the erosion of the starry sky's energy. Lu Yi finally understood why there were so many insectoids in front of them. Not all of them were constellations. This was the same as astral beasts. Astral beasts were born with the ability to survive in space. This was their innate ability. Although he had encountered many insect races in the 9 prefectures, he had not encountered any in the starry sky, so he did not know about these things. The cloud of insectoids was pitch black, like a dark cloud. They were not far away from each other, and the planetary ship was too fast. It was too late to change course. Li Shang could only brace himself and steer the planetary ship toward the cloud of insectoids. Lu Yi picked up Yaya, who had been sitting in his arms, and put her down. He patted her head and said, "Stay here and don't move." He was afraid that if he did not warn her, Yaya would suddenly attack. Although Yaya could easily take care of the problem before her, she was still a trump card. It was better to use her at a critical moment, lest she fall into a deep sleep after attacking. Yaya held a pear spirit fruit the size of a bowl in her hands. She nodded obediently as she gnawed on it. She said in a muffled voice, "Yaya won't move." Lu Yi slowly got up and pulled out the Panshan saber from his waist. He looked at the approaching cloud of insectoids in silence. Suddenly, he remembered that the insectoids and the blood race had joined hands and issued a bounty for him. If the constellations of the blood race could recognize him, the insectoids might be able to as well. He then urged the Thousand Face to change his appearance so that the insectoids would not recognize him. In the next moment, the spiritual ship crashed into the cloud of insectoids. At close range, he could sense that the insectoids were indeed not constellations. Many of them were at the divine ocean level, and some were even at the true lake level. Under such a fast and violent crash, the cloud of insectoids was immediately torn open. Countless insectoids were turned into ashes in an instant. The planetary ship crashed into the cloud of insectoids recklessly, like a knife cutting through tofu. Everywhere it passed, countless insectoids were killed or injured. Lu Ye's vision darkened. He was surrounded by insectoids. Those insectoids who were not constellations were fearlessly using their flesh and blood as barriers to stop the planetary ship from moving forward. However, the effect was minimal. If there were only divine ocean and true lake-level insectoids, it would not be difficult for the planetary ship to break through. However, there were not only divine ocean and true lake-level insectoids in this cloud of insectoids, but also constellation-stage insectoids. It was clear at a glance how to distinguish whether an insect had the strength of a constellation or not. For insects, unless they were exceptionally gifted, they would not be able to develop intelligence. Just like the insects that Lu Yi had encountered in the 9 regions, no matter how strong they would only follow their instincts. Moreover, from their appearance, they were insects of various shapes and sizes that had been magnified countless times. For example, the insects that Lu Yi had killed in the Alpha Origin stage were all juniors that the insect race experts had high hopes for. Each and every one of them possessed extraordinary talent and had gained sentience at the divine sea level. Their future achievements were limitless, but unfortunately, Lu Yi had almost wiped them out. The insectoids were different when they reached constellation. Not only did they develop sentience, but they also became cunning and sinister. Even their appearance had changed drastically. Many insectoids had taken on human form. Some of them retained their insectoid characteristics, but many of them did not even have insectoid characteristics. In terms of appearance, they were no different from humans. Therefore, all insectoids in the insectoid swarm that had a human form were basically constellation insectoids. There were more than 30 of them. These constellation insectoids were undoubtedly much more difficult to deal with than ordinary insectoids. When the planetary ship crashed into the insectoid swarm, these insectoids attacked from all directions. Generally speaking, planetary ships were only used for traveling in the starry sky. Low-grade planetary ships did not even have formations. Lu Yi had spent a total of 300,000 spirit jades to buy this planetary ship. Although it did come with a defensive formation, it was not very powerful. How could such a defensive formation withstand the joint attack of dozens of constellation insectoids? It was about to be broken in an instant. Li Shang hurriedly withdrew the formation, lest it was really broken. It would be very troublesome to repair it. Without the protection of the formation, the constellation insectoids were like cats that had smelled blood. They immediately pounced on Lu Yi. Spirit power surged, and blade light poured out like a waterfall. All the insectoid constellation insectoids felt as if a bloody mouth had suddenly opened under the blooming blade light, revealing ferocious fangs, and was about to devour them. Bared fangs. This was the blade technique that was inherited from Qing Li. It was strange. Qing Li's blade aura was agile, but this move was extremely ferocious, which coincided with the concept of the tyrant blade art. When the blade light flashed past, the insectoid constellation at the forefront did not even have time to react before they were smashed into pieces. Among them was an extremely powerful late-stage constellation insectoid. The remaining insectoid constellations were all horrified. They did not expect such a ridiculous thing to happen. Instinctively, they wanted to retreat, but the sharp saber aura had already enveloped them. It rose and fell like a tide, continuous and endless. A moment later, the planetary ship rushed out of the encirclement of the insectoid swarm. Compared to when they first saw it, the size of the insectoid swarm had shrunk by more than half. The insectoids in the true lake and divine sea realm were either dead or injured. Even more than 10 insectoids in the constellation realm were killed. The insectoid swarm did not dare to pursue, mainly because they could not catch up. They were only intercepted here after receiving the news. In terms of speed, they were far inferior to the planetary ship. In front of the insectoid swarm, the surviving insectoid constellations looked at the stream of light that the planetary ship had turned into with a horrified expression. Such a long-planned interception had actually ended with the insectoid's defeat. This was the result of only one collision. The insectoid constellations had no doubt that if the insectoid had not been in a hurry to leave, it was completely capable of killing them all. Is there such a constellation in the indefinite galaxy? An insectoid with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks spoke in a deep voice. He had a pair of transparent wings on his back. No one knew what kind of insectoid he was. Who knows? But why would a constellation like him go in that direction? An insectoid was puzzled. If he was really a constellation of the indefinite galaxy, there was no reason for him to go in that direction. That was the direction that was far away from the indefinite galaxy. No matter who he is, he's dead meat. An insectoid with 6 compound eyes on his forehead snorted coldly. Although they were at a disadvantage in their interception, there were even more powerful ones behind them. That human constellation was indeed powerful, but he did not think that the insectoid would be able to pass through that obstacle. Moreover, since their side had suffered a setback, Yu Yao of the insectoid race would definitely rush over. On the planetary ship, Li Shang continued to steer the planetary ship forward. She looked at Lu Ye's back in shock because she realized that Lu Ye's strength seemed to have increased by a lot compared to when he had departed from the Wanxiang Sea. She had used the soul possession secret technique on Lu Yi several times. She could directly sense how strong Lu Yi was. She had originally thought that Lu Yi was already strong enough, but she did not expect that this was not his limit. There was still room for improvement. She had not seen Lu Yi cultivate much during this period. How could he have improved so much? At this moment, Lu Yi was sitting cross-legged with the mountain pan saber unsheathed and placed horizontally across his knees. He raised his hand and gently brushed the blade, feeling the sharpness of the blade. Li Shang's feeling was not wrong. He had become much stronger, but this strength was not due to the increase in his foundation. Since he had departed from the Wanxiang Sea, he had not spent much time cultivating. Even if his foundation had improved, it would not have been by much. Moreover, he was now a late-stage constellation. There was a limit to how much he could improve. The main reason he had become stronger than before was the transformation of the mountain pan saber. It could also be said that this was a huge change brought about by external forces. End of chapter. Chapter 1554. Lu Yi had always wanted the Pan Mountain saber to be thick enough for him to kill. He didn't care about its sharpness at all because he had spirit marks to support it. In an environment like the 9 provinces, the Pan Mountain saber was able to keep up with his cultivation progress after each upgrade, satisfying his need to kill. But things were different in space, especially after encountering some powerful enemies. Lu Yi found that the Pan Mountain saber wasn't sharp enough to deal effective damage to his enemies. This was especially true for people with strong physiques. Even if he blessed the Pan Mountain saber with a divine edge, it still didn't perform well. The battle with Xue Hao of the Blood Clan was the best example. It wasn't that Lu Yi had high standards, but that cultivators couldn't always face enemies in the same realm as them. In outer space, there was bound to be enemies stronger than them. With Lu Ye's current strength, the Pan Mountain saber and the divine edge were more than enough to deal with enemies in the same realm. However, Lu Ye's target wasn't the constellations, but Yu Yao. The Pan Mountain saber was already at the peak of the spirit treasure level. There was no room for improvement unless it was upgraded to a Dharma treasure. However, if it was upgraded to a Dharma treasure, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to activate its power with just his spirit power. Fang's submission came at the right time. Compared to before, the new Pan Mountain saber didn't seem to have changed at all. However, it was much sharper. Even when Lu Yi enhanced it with the divine edge spirit mark, it wasn't as sharp as the Pan Mountain saber. Now that it was enhanced with the divine edge, its sharpness was even higher. It could be seen from the insectoid constellation that the insectoids weren't as strong as the Blood Clan in terms of physique. However, the insectoids were stronger than the Blood Clan in terms of physical defense. This was because every insectoid had an extremely hard shell. Even if they transformed into constellations and took human form, the shell would still cover the surface of their bodies, forming a natural defense. However, even such a hard shell couldn't withstand a single slash from the new Pan Mountain saber. The late-stage constellation insectoid's shell was especially strong. Lu Yi felt that if the Pan Mountain saber was enhanced with the divine edge, he wouldn't be able to break through it even if he attacked it 5 times. Now, however, he only needed 1 slash to kill it. The new Pan Mountain blade that Liao transformed into was a world of difference in sharpness compared to the previous one. This was Lu Ye's first battle after subduing Qi. He was very satisfied with the new mountain saber's performance. That day when he fought with Xue Hao, if he had this Panshan blade in his hand, perhaps Li Shang would not have needed to start a soul battle to kill him. Li Shang felt that Lu Ye's strength had greatly increased because of this. Under the same blade attack, Lu Yi could now cause much more damage than before. The star boat continued forward and didn't run into any more insectoids. However, both Li Shang and Lu Yi could feel that the insectoids had not given up yet. This was only the calm before the storm. Perhaps there was some unknown danger waiting for them ahead. Or perhaps Yu Yao or even Ri Zhao's insectoid experts had chased after them. 10 days later, the star boat, which was flying forward at a high speed, suddenly felt as if it had bumped into an invisible wall and was instantly met with great resistance. The star boat shook violently, as if it had sunk into a swamp. Even though it was still moving forward, its speed was clearly slowing down. Under the great inertia, Lu Ye's body was pushed forward uncontrollably. Yaya and Li Shang, who were beside him, were also pushed forward. Lu Yi reacted quickly and scooped Yaya into his arms. Li Shang was even more decisive as he pounced on Lu Yi, instantly using the soul-binding secret technique. In an instant, Lu Yi felt that his strength had been greatly improved. His 5 senses became sharper, his thoughts faster, and even the flow of his spiritual energy became faster. The speed of the star boat became even slower, and in less than 3 breaths of time, it went from a high speed to a standstill. In the next moment, attacks that blotted out the sky and covered the earth shot towards it from all directions. Lu Yi jumped out of the star boat and dodged the attacks. After he steadied himself, he finally saw the situation in front of him clearly. There were many large and small meteorites in the vicinity. There were countless meteorites like this in the starry sky. However, at this moment, the figures of many star mansions of the insectoids could be seen behind these meteorites. They had been lying in ambush here, waiting for Lu Yi to pass by so that they could attack him. On one of the huge meteorites, there was a furry spider. The spider was as big as a city. It stood on the meteorite, almost occupying the entire meteorite. However, the spider's aura wasn't very strong. At most, it was at the late stage of the star mansions. Lu Yi was slightly surprised because although the spider looked like an insectoid, it wasn't actually an insectoid, but a star beast. It was probably a star beast tamed by the insectoids. Numerous spider webs that couldn't be seen with the naked eye could be seen crisscrossing in the area where the spider was. Lu Yi looked at his star boat again, and only then did he see clearly what was stopping his star boat. It was a huge spiderweb with the asteroids in the surroundings as its nodes. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it. Since the starboat was sailing at a high speed, neither Lu Yi nor Li Shang noticed it. As soon as they crashed into it, they were trapped by the spiderweb. It had Yu Yao's aura. Lu Yi sized it up coldly and found that it was probably an early-stage Yu Yao. At this moment, Yu Yao was also staring at Lu Yi with cold eyes. To the insectoids, there was nothing in the universe that they couldn't kill. Apart from those who were on good terms with the blood race, all other races were their enemies. Not to mention that Lu Yi had killed many insectoids along the way. He knew that Lu Yi was only at the late stage of the star mansions. The only reason he could reach this place was because of his star boat. Now that his star boat was blocked, he couldn't do anything else. At this moment, he stared at Lu Yi and waved his hand indifferently. Kill him. As for Lu Ye's background and what he wanted to do, he couldn't be bothered to ask. At his command, many insectoid star mansions immediately pounced on Lu Yi. In Lu Ye's arms, Yaya looked angry and showed signs of wanting to attack. However, before she could, Lu Yi slapped her head and said indifferently, "Calm down." An early-stage Yu Yao wasn't worth exposing Yaya. Moreover, in this situation, Lu Yi wanted to test out the results of his recent cultivation. With a raise of his hand, a dozen or so imperial weapons shot out in all directions, each of them powerful. However, these imperial weapons didn't have much effect. Apart from a few that injured a few insectoid star mansions, the rest were all dodged. Lu Yi held Yaya in one hand and wielded his blade in the other. Under the enhancement of Li Shang's soul possession, a faint blood-red color appeared on the surface of his body. The blood-red light shot out in an extremely abnormal trajectory, almost instantly breaking out of the insectoid star mansion's encirclement. The insectoid star mansions didn't even have time to react before one of them let out a cry of shock. Then blood spurted out and his body was cut in half. The Yu Yao insectoid who had been watching coldly from the side narrowed his eyes and stared at Lu Ye's figure in astonishment. Even he hadn't been able to grasp Lu Ye's movements in that instant. Taking a closer look, he saw Lu Ye's figure moving quickly again. What happened next made the Yu Yao insectoid unable to believe his eyes. The human star mansions flitted back and forth across the vast expanse of the starry sky. His figure flickered in and out of existence like a ghost. Every time he appeared, an insectoid star mansions were bound to suffer. They were either decapitated and killed or cut in half at the waist, wailing in pain. Whether it was early stage, middle stage, or late stage star mansions, none of the insectoids targeted by him could withstand a single blow from his blade. Even the insectoid carapace that they were so proud of could not withstand his killing power. The encirclement that the insectoids had been preparing for many days didn't even seem to exist to him. He could easily find an opening and kill his way out of the encirclement. Before the insectoid star mansions could react, he could come back and kill his way through the encirclement. The Yu Yao insectoid was horrified as he watched. To him, this did not seem like a bloody massacre. It was more like the blooming of an art. Even as an enemy, the Yu Yao insectoid had to admit that this human star mansion's killing methods were extremely pleasing to the eye. However, it was precisely this pleasing scene that caused the life force of the insectoids to wither away. It made him shudder from the bottom of his heart. While the Yu Yao insectoid star mansions were shocked, Lu Yi was elated. He had only comprehended Qing Li's bearing fangs from Qi's inheritance so far. He had yet to comprehend the essence of Yan Shi's leaping technique, so he had not passed Yan Shi's test. Even so, he could feel the power of this leaping technique during the battle. It was useful. If it was in the past, facing such an encirclement, he would have no other way to deal with it other than to kill his way out. However, at this moment, with his immature leaping technique, the insectoid star mansions could not fight back at all. Just like when he first fought Yan Shi, the insectoids could not even see his figure. Although he had yet to comprehend the essence of the leaping technique, Lu Yi could use the imperial equipment that he had sent out beforehand to activate the void spirit patterns to move around. Therefore, compared to Yan Shi's leaping technique, which was like flowing water, Lu Ye's leaping technique was more ghostly. When he first saw Yan Shi's leaping technique, Lu Yi guessed that it was a technique used to deal with encirclements. Now that he tried it out, it was indeed effective. Destroy those imperial equipment. The Yu Yao insectoid finally saw some clues. When Lu Yi first attacked, he did not pay much attention to the imperial equipment that he had sent out. They were already in the galaxy, so who would play with imperial equipment? Now, he knew that those imperial equipment were a hidden technique. He gave the order and attacked at the same time, sending the imperial equipment flying or destroying them. Then he rushed into the battlefield and pounced on Lu Yi. He originally thought that he would not need to make a move this time, but who knew that he had no choice but to make a move? Although there were many insectoids on his side, they could not withstand the onslaught of the enemy. If this continued, they would all be wiped out. End of chapter. Chapter 1555. Less than 10 breaths of time had passed since the bug tribe had attacked and Yu Yao had joined the battle. However, more than 10 bug tribe lunar mansions had been slain in this short span of time, and the rest were shocked. Yu Yao of the bug tribe had thought that he would be able to control the situation if he joined the battle, but he was shocked to find that it was useless. Even though he had ordered the destruction of the imperial weapons scattered throughout the battlefield, that figure was still as elusive as ever, and he could not find any trace of him at all. Yu Yao of the bug tribe roared angrily. This scene made him furious. He was indeed powerful, but the enemy did not even bother to exchange blows with him. His figure flitted back and forth, weaving in and out of the bug tribe's formation as he focused on killing the lunar mansions. More and more bug tribe lunar mansions were killed. Their tough shells did not provide them with any sense of security at all. Lu Yi gradually came to a realization. Although his battle with Yan Shi was intense, it was not a true battle to the death. This was because Lu Yi knew that even if he was slain in the Green Hall, he would only lose a strand of his divine sense. Thus, he did not feel the danger of death. However, this was different. This was a true battle. Yu Yao of the bug tribe only saw him reaping the lunar mansions effortlessly, but in reality he was walking the line between life and death every time he flitted about. This was because any mistake could lead to his eternal damnation. Yan Shi's leaping technique was, in reality, a dangerous move. This kind of comprehension could never be experienced in the Great Green Hall. Lu Yi finally understood why he had never passed Yan Shi's test. Even though he had always felt that he had mastered the essence of his flitting technique, he was still no match for Yan Shi. Now that he had such a realization, Lu Yi was confident that he could pass Yan Shi's test. Unfortunately, the timing was not right. Otherwise, he would have really wanted to enter the Green Hall to test out his idea. This was a battle that was different from all the battles in the past. In the battles in the past, Lu Yi had mostly relied on the profoundness of the tyrant saber art to oppress his enemies with supreme might. However, in this unique battle, Lu Yi felt joy for the first time. He felt the joy of moving like the wind and casually taking the lives of his enemies. This was undoubtedly a very novel experience, and Lu Yi could not help but feel a little strange. Flitting was not just about flitting about. Flitting about was a process. If he wanted to kill his enemies, he had to rely on that instant of explosive power after flitting about. Lu Yi was not lacking in this aspect. Be it overbearing knife or Qing Li's bared fangs, they were both methods of explosive power. Even more insectoid constellations died in battle, but that insectoid Yu Yao didn't even manage to touch a single hair on Lu Ye's head. Seeing that less than half of the insectoid constellations were still alive, he hurriedly roared, "Spread out! Hide far away!" The insectoid constellations were already in a state of panic. No one knew if they would be the next unlucky one. Now that they received the order, they immediately scattered in all directions, wanting to escape the battlefield. Lu Yi stared in one direction and gave chase. After a few leaps, he wiped out all the fleeing insectoid constellations. Lu Yi wanted to chase in another direction, but how could the insectoid Yu Yao give him the chance to do so? She stubbornly refused to let him go. Lu Yi repeatedly tried to shake her off, but to no avail. Previously, there were many insectoid constellations acting as cover, and the insectoid Yu Yao's hands were tied, allowing Lu Yi to roam freely. Now that there were no other insectoids around, and she was alone with Lu Yi, she naturally had nothing to worry about. Her transcendence energy surged wildly, and her blood essence surged. Her entire body was covered in a layer of bloody mist, as if she was burning. If the other party was a mid-stage Yu Yao, Lu Yi wouldn't have thought much of it. With the difference in strength, it was useless even if he had any ideas. However, the other party was only an early-stage Yu Yao. Lu Yi felt that he might be able to put up a fight. After making up his mind, he decided not to chase after the insectoid constellations. His figure flashed, turning into a streak of bloody light. Like a breeze, he drifted toward the insectoid Yu Yao as fast as lightning. Seeing that Lu Yi actually dared to take the initiative to attack, Yu Yao flew into a rage. She waited for Lu Yi to get close before suddenly throwing a punch. Powerful transcendence energy condensed on the tip of her fist, waiting for the punch to hit its target before exploding. Yu Yao frowned. She could feel that her punch had missed Lu Yi. Instead, her arm had been slashed by the other party. Sparks flew everywhere. A powerful force traveled through her arm, leaving a 1-inch deep crack on her carapace. What great speed, what great strength, and what a sharp knife. Yu Yao of the insectoid race finally understood why the constellations of her race were no match for this human. Such terrifying speed and strength were not something a late-stage constellation could possess. Coupled with the other party's sharp saber, even the insectoid constellation's carapace would not be able to withstand the other party's slash. Even though she was a Yu Yao, her carapace was still damaged. However, this kind of wound didn't affect her at all. She turned her head and saw Lu Ye's figure standing a few miles away, quietly staring at her. Their eyes met. One was spitting fire, while the other was solemn. "I can fight." This was the feeling Lu Yi had after exchanging blows with the other party. After all, he was currently in the state of Li Shang's possession, so he could unleash strength that exceeded his own. However, there was still a gap between their realms, so he still had to be careful. After all, there was a qualitative difference between a constellation's spiritual power and Yu Yao's transcendence energy. Although the other party's punch hadn't landed on him, just the aftershocks of that punch had made him feel threatened. Thus, if he really wanted to fight the other party, he still couldn't fight head-on. There was no chance of victory if he fought head-on. Just the clash of their energies alone gave Lu Yi no chance of victory. Unless he could get Li Shang to initiate a soul battle and destroy the other party's soul. However, Li Shang had only been able to initiate a soul battle against Xue Hao the last time because the other party had let down his guard. That was because Xue Hao felt that victory was already in his grasp. This time, his chances weren't high. Even if Li Shang could really initiate a soul battle, Lu Yi had to face more than one insectoid Yu Yao right now. There were still many insectoid constellations watching from afar. Once the soul battle started, Lu Ye's physical body would be defenseless. He still had to rely on the leaping technique. Strictly speaking, the leaping technique was most suitable in a situation where he was surrounded. The leaping technique was about coming and going like the wind, catching the enemy off guard. Against a single opponent, the leaping technique lost its meaning because there was only one enemy. There was no way to catch others off guard. However, if he couldn't meet force with force, Lu Yi had no other choice. The mountain plate saber was sharp enough, but it only left a small mark on the other party's carapace. It didn't even leave a scratch on the other party's flesh. Lu Yi reckoned that even if he used the divine edge, he still wouldn't be able to do much to the other party. As spiritual power circulated rapidly in his body, Yu Yao could no longer hold herself back. Her figure flickered, and she charged at Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised his saber to meet her. He knew very well that he didn't have many chances to fight someone of a higher realm. He might only have one chance, so he decided to give it his all. In an instant, the two figures collided. Yu Yao punched out with both fists, and a violent surge of energy covered a large area in front of her. She had seen Lu Ye's leaping technique before, so she naturally knew how agile the enemy was. This way, she could seal off all of Lu Ye's escape routes. The barrier condensed from pure transcendence energy was like an extremely sturdy wall, blocking in front of Lu Yi. However, in the next instant, Yu Yao's expression changed. This was because the enemy who had been charging at her aggressively with saber in hand, seemingly wanting to fight her to the death, had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yu Yao's divine sense spread out, and she instantly grasped the location of Lu Ye's aura. She quickly turned her head and saw that Lu Yi had already appeared beside her. His pitch-black saber slashed down viciously without any fancy moves. Spiritual power surged violently from the blade. This was definitely Lu Ye's full power. He had a ferocious aura that said, "Either the enemy dies or I dies." However, Yu Yao didn't seem to care at all. She simply raised an arm and held it in front of her. This saber strike looked extremely ferocious, but she had personally experienced Lu Ye's attack before, so she knew that this saber couldn't do anything to her. She could easily block it with the protection of her carapace. She clenched her other hand into a fist and punched at Lu Yi. The saber slashed down. Yu Yao was slightly surprised because she felt that this saber strike had left an even deeper scar on her carapace. Her opponent's saber seemed to have become even sharper than before. However, that was all. If the saber couldn't break through her carapace's protection, it was all in vain. Before she could finish her thoughts, Yu Yao's heart suddenly palpitated. She had a bad feeling about this. Then, she seemed to hear the sound of waves rising and falling. In front of her, Lu Ye's expression was as calm as an ancient well. He ignored the opponent's fist. In reality, he couldn't dodge, so he could only hurriedly form a few holy defenses to protect himself. The coiling mountain saber enhanced by the divine edge spirit inscriptions was indeed sharper than before. However, it could only leave a deeper wound on the opponent's carapace, barely touching the flesh. However, Lu Yi wasn't relying on the divine edge. At this moment, countless tiny waves undulated on the coiling mountain saber's blade. They flowed rapidly along the blade's edge, surging back and forth. In an instant, the coiling mountain saber's blade turned into a saw blade. Sparks flew in all directions as Yu Yao's carapace was broken open. Intense pain shot through her body, causing her to cry out in shock. Lu Yi clenched his teeth and unleashed his full power, slashing down fiercely. Blood splattered everywhere. Along with it, half of his arm flew out. The several layers of holy defenses in front of Lu Yi shattered like paper. Barriers condensed from spiritual energy couldn't withstand the impact of transcendence energy. In a hurry, Lu Yi turned around. A hard fist slammed into Lu Ye's back, punching a hole in it. His chest swelled up, as if his heart was about to burst out of his chest. Under the tremendous force, Lu Yi flew out like an arrow. Blood spurted from his mouth. He felt a powerful force rampaging through his body like a poisonous snake. It was undoubtedly the transcendence energy that had invaded his body. However, the innate skill tree soon came into play. It burned away the transcendence energy that had invaded his body. After flying for dozens of li, Lu Yi finally regained his footing. As soon as he turned around, he saw the Yu Yao insect chasing after him with a ferocious expression. End of chapter. Chapter 1556. Yu Yao had actually lost an arm to a constellation. Even if he had been careless, this should not have happened. This was a great humiliation, and he would be mocked by the other Yu Yao for the rest of his life. With such humiliation, how could he vent his anger if he did not kill Lu Yi? But before he could reach Lu Yi, he was met with a pair of cold eyes. The source of this gaze was not Lu Yi, but Yaya, who he had been holding in his arms all this time. Yaya was very obedient. Lu Yi had told her not to be rash, so she had been quiet until now, until Lu Yi was injured by Yu Yao. Yaya was clearly a little angry. At this moment, there was a strange glow in her eyes. She stared at the furious insectoid Yu Yao as if she was looking at a dead person. Under her gaze, Yu Yao felt her heart beating like a drum. The more she rushed forward, the stronger the sense of danger in her heart, as if there was some inexplicable danger waiting for her. Under Lu Ye's watchful gaze, Yu Yao of the insect race began to slow down. Finally, she came to a stop a few dozen kilometers away. He stared at Yaya, who was in Lu Ye's arms, and his expression changed inexplicably. He hesitated for a while, but in the end he did not dare to take the risk. Without saying a word, he turned around and left. He did not think that Yaya was an ordinary child. How could she be ordinary if she could survive in the starry sky? However, he had not sensed any trace of cultivation from Yaya from beginning to end. This made him somewhat unable to see through her. It was precisely because he could not see through her that he did not dare to take the risk. This time, the insect race had kicked an iron plate. He did not know where these humans had come from, but they had killed so many of the insect race's constellations. Even he himself had not been able to regain his dignity. Yu Yao of the insect race left, not forgetting to take her severed arm with her. The insect race constellations watching from afar naturally did not dare to stay any longer and scattered like birds. Lu Yi coughed softly and suppressed the roiling blood in his chest. He realized that there was still a considerable gap between him and Yu Yao. Even though he was now possessed by Li Shang and had the advantage of the new mountain saber, he still found it difficult to deal with Yu Yao of the insect race. The reason for this was the difference in the quality of the power in his body. If both of them had spiritual energy in their bodies, Lu Yi felt that he would be able to kill Yu Yao even if her cultivation was higher. However, before the spiritual energy in his body was converted into transcendence energy, it would be too difficult to kill Yu Yao. "Daddy, I scared him away." Yaya suddenly opened her mouth with a proud expression. "Yaya, you're awesome." Lu Yi praised as he turned around to look at the place where his star boat had crashed. The star boat was still tied up by the spider web and hovering between a few meteorites. However, the star beast spider that had occupied the largest meteorite was nowhere to be seen. Lu Yi had been busy fighting the insects just now, so he didn't notice when the star beast spider had disappeared. Li Shang dispelled the soul attachment and flew out of Lu Ye's body, saying, "Wait here. I'll go get the star boat." Lu Yi nodded and sat down. Then he took out some healing and recovery pills from his storage ring and swallowed them. It consumed a lot of energy. Although the leaping technique was good, it put a huge burden on the body. This burden didn't just come from the consumption of the body's spiritual energy, but also from the pressure on the body. It could be said that if the body wasn't strong enough, it would be impossible to obtain the essence of the leaping technique. The battle just now hadn't lasted too long, but Lu Ye's spirit chi had already been consumed by more than half, and even his flesh was showing signs of being torn apart. However, this kind of damage was nothing to him, and he could easily recover after some rest. Even the punch from Yu Yao from the insect clan that landed on his back was only a light injury. Yu Yao, on the other hand, had lost an arm to him. Normally speaking, it wouldn't be a big deal for Yu Yao to lose an arm. Just like Kong Cheng, who had lost an arm but still managed to regrow it after paying a certain price. However, it was Fong's new mountain blade that had severed his arm. Lu Yi knew about Fong's strange power. If Yu Yao wanted to regrow her severed arm, it might be a little troublesome, unless he had the ability to dispel Fong's power. Overall, although he didn't manage to kill Yu Yao in this battle, he didn't suffer any losses. Li Shang quickly pulled the planetary ship out of the spiderweb and steered it to Lu Yi. He then cleaned up the battlefield and collected the storage rings of the dead insectoid constellations. Only then did the group set off again. Lu Yi originally thought that the insectoids wouldn't give up so easily. If Yu Yao couldn't take them down in the early stages, there would definitely be stronger insectoids waiting for them ahead. However, to his surprise, the rest of the journey was peaceful. No more insectoids came looking for trouble. Even if they occasionally encountered some insectoids, they would avoid them and pretend they didn't see them. After thinking about it carefully, Lu Yi more or less understood. Now that the insectoids wanted to encroach on indefinite star system, they wouldn't have the leisure to target a passerby. Moreover, the further he went, the further away he would be from indefinite. The insectoids wouldn't chase after him all the way. This was something Lu Yi was happy to see. Although he hated the insectoids, He didn't want to get entangled with them at a time like this. Without being disturbed, his injuries healed very quickly. Almost immediately after his injuries were healed, he immersed himself in his thoughts and entered the green palace inside the puppet. A short while later, two figures flashed back and forth in the hall. Both of them were as fast as lightning. Lu Yi and Yan Shi had been searching for an opportunity to attack. Unfortunately, neither of them could find it, and they could only continue to flick about like this. This stalemate didn't make Lu Yi feel bored. Instead, he was rather excited. In the past, when he fought against Yan Shi, he basically couldn't last for long before he found an opportunity to kill him. Now that he was able to maintain a stalemate with Yan Shi, it undoubtedly meant that his technique had improved significantly. This was all thanks to his previous bloody battle with the insectoids. However, while he was excited, Lu Yi was also somewhat troubled. If this stalemate continued, neither of them would be able to do anything to the other. In that case, how could he pass Yan Shi's test? They couldn't compete to see who could last longer, could they? Just as he was thinking about this, Yan Shi's figure suddenly froze. Lu Yi also hurriedly stopped and looked over. He saw Yan Shi nodding slightly at him, then his figure suddenly dissipated. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized what was going on. It seemed that things weren't as complicated as he thought. In the technique, as long as one could maintain a stalemate with Yan Shi for a certain amount of time, they would undoubtedly pass his test. Just like when Qing Li's figure disappeared and Yan Shi appeared, now that Yan Shi's figure had dissipated, another figure appeared out of thin air. Lu Yi looked forward with some anticipation. The inheritance left behind by the two ancestors in skeleton had benefited him greatly, so Lu Yi wanted to know which race the next ancestor would be from and what inheritance he had left behind. The figure slowly condensed and gradually solidified, but Lu Ye's expression slowly became strange. This was because he realized that the third ancestor actually looked like an insectoid. Taking a closer look, it wasn't just similar, it was actually an insectoid. Skeleton had actually been obtained by an insectoid before. This made Lu Yi a little surprised. However, on second thought, skeleton had existed in this world for countless years. In these tens of thousands of years, who knew how many experts had obtained it, so it wasn't strange that there was an insectoid. This insectoid had the appearance of a human, but his two arms weren't normal arms, but two long swords. This design was very familiar to Lu Yi. Back in the 9 states, he had seen this design before. Among the insectoid, there was a branch that looked like a praying mantis, and the two swords were like that. This was also the weapon that the praying mantis used to kill their enemies, unparalleled in sharpness. After the insectoid appeared, he glanced at Lu Yi, and just like when Qing Li and Yan Shi first appeared, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Insectoid, Qing Mantis." This time, he only reported his race and name, but didn't say where he came from. As soon as he finished speaking, Qing Mantis turned around, and a mantis sword came slashing down. Lu Yi quickly raised his sword to block, and with a clang, Lu Ye's body sank down slightly. The fight with Qing Li and Yan Shi made Lu Yi understand that no matter how great these ancestors' achievements were, or how high they stood, in this green hall inside the Fong Blade, the spirit power that they could use was almost the same as his. This was because the source of that spirit power was the spirit power that he channeled into the blade. However, it was only the spirit power that was almost the same. Their strength, speed, and reflexes were all at the standard that they had when they were in the later stages of the constellation realm. Just by looking at the strength of Qing Mantis' sword, Lu Yi knew that his strength wasn't inferior to his own, and his speed seemed to be even faster. Under normal circumstances, Lu Yi would definitely counterattack after blocking this attack, but he quickly realized that he didn't even have the chance to do so. Under the pressure of the Mantis sword, Qing Mantis turned around. Before Lu Yi could recover from the pressure of the first strike, Qing Mantis' second strike was already coming down, and its speed seemed to be slightly faster than the first strike. Lu Ye's body shook again, and he was surprised because this strike wasn't just faster, it seemed to be stronger as well. Then, his expression turned bitter because he already had a premonition of what was going to happen next. As expected, Qing Mantis kept on turning, and the two sabers crisscrossed and slashed at Lu Yi. After the first strike, There was a second strike, and there was no pause at all. In Lu Ye's perception, each of Qing Fu's slashes was stronger than the last. In just a few dozen strikes, Lu Yi was almost pressed to the ground. He didn't use Yan Shi's leaping technique because this wasn't a life-and-death battle with the enemy. He wanted to comprehend the inheritance that Qing Mantis had left behind. So, while he was under great pressure, he observed Qing Mantis's movements closely. The swift strikes left Lu Yi with no chance of counterattacking, and the increasing weight of the sabers slowly pushed Lu Yi to his limits. Until Qing Mantis slashed down again, Lu Yi couldn't resist anymore and was sent flying out of the Green Hall. End of chapter. Chapter 1557. Lu Yi frowned as he felt a slight pain in his head. There was no doubt that Qing Fu's inheritance was not easy to comprehend because she used dual blades. If Lu Yi really wanted to comprehend Qing Fu's inheritance, he would have to find a second blade. Ever since he started cultivating, Lu Yi had never used dual blades. He had no experience in this aspect. Trying it out rashly would not only not increase his strength, but would also hinder him. However, in order to comprehend Qing Fu's inheritance, he had no choice but to give it a try. If he could not pass Qing Fu's test, he would not be able to see the glory of his ancestors. However, he soon thought of another problem. He was only a manifestation of his divine sense in the Cyan Hall, not his real body. He did not bring the Panshan blade in, but it appeared directly on his body. Even if he did find another blade, could he bring it into the Cyan Hall? Although he had doubts, he still had to give it a try. He had collected many storage rings, some from the Mist Dragon, and some from the insect race cultivators that Li Shang had collected. He had been too lazy to check before, but now he could only see if there were any blade-type treasures in those storage rings. He took out those storage rings and opened them one by one. There was nothing good in the insect race cultivators' storage rings. They were all useless things. However, Lu Yi did not find many valuable treasures in the Mist Dragon storage rings. He even gained a lot of spirit jades and spirit crystals. He really did find a blade. Lu Yi took out the blade and examined it carefully. He was slightly surprised. This blade was very long, more than half the length of the Panshan blade. It did not have a scabbard. Even if it had been in the storage ring for many years, it still did not show any signs of decay. Lu Yi tried to channel his spirit qi into it, but there was no reaction. This thing was most likely a transcendent armor-grade long blade. It was impossible to determine the cultivation of the cultivators trapped in the Mist Dragon, but he could tell by looking at Yaya that it was a starry sky wonder that even Rizhao was lost in. Therefore, it was normal for Yu Yao or Rizhao to be trapped in there. It was not surprising that they had transcendent armor-grade treasures in their storage rings. This magic treasure-level saber had a strange shape. It looked like a huge fang that had been broken from the mouth of some ferocious beast. Lu Yi looked at the saber hilt and found a symbol engraved on it. Looking at it carefully, he could vaguely make out the word fang. Teeth knife. With the two sabers in hand, Lu Yi did not tarry. He immersed himself in the Azure Hall once more. He looked at his left hand and froze. He hadn't brought teeth knife with him. His left hand, which had been holding teeth knife, was now empty. How was he supposed to play this game? If he wanted to comprehend Qing Fu's double blade art, he would need two blades. However, he only had one Panshan blade. He couldn't bring the second one with him. How could he comprehend it? He couldn't possibly use the Panshan saber's scabbard, could he? While Lu Yi looked helpless, Qing Fu didn't hesitate to attack again. Just like the first time, she spun around and slashed down with her two swords. Her speed was getting faster and faster, and her strength was getting stronger and stronger. Lu Yi found it harder and harder to defend. He tried to use the scabbard of the Panshan saber as a second sword, but he felt that it wasn't quite right. Not long after, Qing Fu was forced out of the Azure Hall. Lu Yi had a headache. He was faced with an unsolvable problem. When he immersed himself in the Azure Hall, he could only see the Panshan saber. Without a second sword, he couldn't comprehend Qing Fu's legacy. If he couldn't comprehend it, he wouldn't be able to see the power of his ancestors. In this situation, it seemed that he would have to use the scabbard of the Panshan saber as a second sword. But when Lu Yi tried it, he realized that it wasn't a wise choice. While he was thinking, Lu Ye's eyes brightened. He seemed to have forgotten something. If he could bring that thing into the Azure Hall, then his problem would be solved. If he could immerse himself in the Azure Hall, and the Panshan saber was reflected in it, then that thing should have been reflected in it as well. He just hadn't thought about it. Thinking of this, Lu Yi rested for a while and entered the Azure Hall again. This time, before Qing Fu could make a move, Lu Yi lowered his head and looked at his mountain pan saber. Then, with a thought, he reached out and grabbed the other saber. Soul Cutter. This was a treasure from Jiuzhou's Tianji treasury. It was a soul item, but it had the ability to meld with other weapons. It could even change its shape. Lu Yi had always used it to set up restrictions on his saber to increase the power of the Panshan saber. From the looks of it, the soul-severing saber could indeed materialize in this green hall. Lu Yi now had 2 sabers at his disposal. Han Sen's heart jumped. He quickly changed Soul Cutter to look like Teeth Knife. He thought that if he really mastered dual knife skills, he would need to use Teeth Knife to fight his enemies. If he could familiarize himself with Teeth Knife, he would be able to use it more effectively. As soon as he finished this, Qing Fu came to kill him. This time, Lu Yi didn't last long, but he could finally practice. He was happy. On this day, when Lu Ye's mind exited the Azure Hall, he heard Li Shang say, "The Thousand Hills grave is up ahead." When Lu Yi heard this, he looked up and saw a large patch of pink in front of him. The pink patches were scattered all over the sky. At first glance, they looked like pink cotton candy. He didn't know when they were born, and he didn't know how long they would last. But the pink nebulae were very strange. They all looked like grave mounds. That was how the Thousand Hills grave got its name. This was a space wonder, but it was different from most space wonders. Although it covered an area large enough to cover several galaxies, the nebula burial mounds were very scattered. Therefore, although it was a space wonder, as long as one didn't enter the nebula burial mounds and just passed by, there wasn't much danger. Yaya climbed on top of Lu Ye's head and looked at the pink nebulae. She cheered and seemed very happy. What a sight! Lu Yi looked at it quietly. The starry sky was full of different sceneries. It was very rare to see such a spectacular scene in the domain. Even someone as strong as Ri Guang could only feel his own insignificance in front of such a space wonder. However, the reincarnation tree had given Lu Yi a warning in the star chart. Although there was no special danger in the Thousand Hills grave, he couldn't easily get close to the pink nebulae. This was because these things were very mysterious and strange. It was not something a constellation like Lu Yi could deal with. Lu Yi didn't know what was strange about these nebulae, but he wouldn't try it. "Are you going home or am I going home?" Li Shang couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Ever since they embarked on the return journey, the task of steering the star boat had basically fallen on Li Shang's shoulders. Moreover, when she was steering the star boat, Lu Yi was basically in a meditative state of cultivation. If it weren't for Yaya accompanying her, the journey would have been extremely boring. Lu Yi was embarrassed. He felt that he shouldn't have done this. After all, he was going home. It was wrong of him to treat Li Shang as a laborer. He quickly took out a lot of spirit refining grass and put it in a storage ring. He offered it with both hands. "Thank you for your hard work." Li Shang grunted and said, "That's more like it." She didn't really want to ask Lu Yi for anything, but she couldn't refuse the spirit refining grass. It was very useful to her. She happily accepted it and felt much better. The planetary boat entered the area enveloped by the Thousand Hills grave, passing through numerous pink nebulas that looked like grave mounds. Lu Yi did not enter the Green Palace again. Although the reincarnation tree was marked on the star map, it was better to be safe than sorry. Therefore, he felt that it was better to be cautious. Han Sen used this time to familiarize himself with Teeth Knife. If a weapon practitioner wanted to use the full power of their weapon, they had to practice it through many life and death situations. Take the Pan Mountain knife for example. It had been with Lu Yi since he was very weak. It had already reached the level where Lu Yi could use the knife. So, Lu Yi could use the full power of the Pan Mountain knife. If it were any other knife, it would be a bit uncomfortable. Teeth Knife was used to learn green skeleton knife skills. It wasn't Lu Ye's main knife, and he didn't have that many life and death situations to practice it. Plus, it was a treasure. It wouldn't be easy for Lu Yi to use it as a weapon. So, Lu Yi thought of a trick. This was the most common way for weapon practitioners to get new weapons. Every now and then, he would put a drop of his own blood into the knife to familiarize himself with it. That way, when he needed to use it, he would be able to wield it like an extension of his arm. According to the star chart, it would take at least 3 months to get through the Thousand Hills grave. The journey was very peaceful. Because the nebulae were very scattered, the ship rarely had to change directions. If they did, they just had to avoid the tombs. 1 month had passed. On this day, while the ship was traveling, Yaya excitedly pointed in a direction and said, "Dad, look." Lu Yi looked in the direction she was pointing. At first, he didn't see anything special. But as he got closer and closer, he was shocked. This was because a gigantic bird was standing on top of a grave shield nebula in that direction. The nebulae in the Thousand Hills grave were each the size of a star. But at this moment, the bird was standing on top of them. It looked like it was standing on top of a bird's nest. The bird was so big that Lu Yi had never seen it before. The bird's body was green, and he didn't know if it was a star beast or not. At this moment, the green bird was using its sharp claws to pull at the pink nebula. It looked like it was looking for something. Under its pull, the pink nebula moved as if it had a life of its own. Sometimes, pink tentacles would come out of the pink nebula and attack the green bird. They were so powerful that they could destroy stars and moons. End of chapter. Chapter 1558. Lu Yi was dumbfounded. Only now did he realize how dangerous the pink nebula was. Not to mention him, even Yaya might not be able to withstand such an attack. However, the blue bird didn't seem to notice it at all. It simply ignored the attacks of the pink tentacles and allowed them to hit its body. Green halos flashed across its body, blocking the attacks of the tentacles, while the pair of sharp claws under its feet kept moving. After an unknown period of time, the pink nebula split open from the middle, and the blue bird pecked down with its beak. Lu Yi didn't see clearly what it pecked, but he vaguely saw something that looked like a huge pink worm being pecked into its mouth. It raised its head and swallowed it. After the blue bird swallowed the pink worm-like thing, the pink tentacles that were still attacking it seemed to have lost their power. They fell limply and merged back into the nebula. However, the blue bird seemed to be drunk. Its body swayed left and right, and it flapped its wings a few times. After a while, it lay on the nebula, motionless. "Let's go, let's go." Lu Yi hurriedly called out to Li Shang. They couldn't stay here any longer. Although the blue bird didn't seem to notice them, such a ferocious bird wasn't something they could provoke. What made Lu Ye's hair stand on end was that the nebula in the Thousand Hills grave seemed to be alive. Li Shang also knew that they couldn't stay here any longer. He hurriedly steered the starboat to the side at full speed. Just as the starboat was making a detour, Lu Yi suddenly saw the cyan bird raise its head and cast a glance in his direction. Even though they were tens of thousands of miles apart, Lu Yi still felt a chill run down his spine from his head to the soles of his feet when he saw the cyan bird. Then he saw the blue bird open its beak. Li Shang immediately cried out in alarm, because an inexplicable suction force suddenly appeared around them. Under the suction force, he couldn't steer the starboat anymore. The next moment, the starboat flew towards the blue bird like an arrow leaving the bow. "It's over." Lu Ye's expression was bitter. He knew that he was really going to die this time. He had seen the blue bird's power from afar just now and knew that it was not something he could resist. Even if he asked Yaya to help, the chances were slim. With this bite, the starboat and the people on it would definitely be devoured. Why am I so unlucky? Lu Yi was puzzled. Everything had been fine along the way, but now they had to suffer a calamity. He and Li Shang were both nervous and perturbed. Yaya, on the other hand, was clapping her hands and cheering with a happy look on her face, as if she was completely unaware of the imminent doom. In less than 10 breaths of time, the starboat had traveled hundreds of thousands of miles and was sucked right in front of the blue bird. However, to Lu Ye's surprise, just as the starboat was about to fall into the blue bird's mouth, the power that was trying to devour the starboat suddenly disappeared. Just like that, the starboat floated in front of the blue bird. Looking at it from a close distance, Lu Yi could feel the magnificence of the blue bird's body. At this moment, Lu Yi couldn't see the blue bird's full appearance at all, only a pair of huge sun-like eyes blocking his vision. The blue bird seemed to be really drunk, as its eyes were somewhat hazy. It tilted its head and sized up the star boat, then looked at the three little people on it. Then, its eyelids opened and closed, and it seemed to have lost its interest in studying them. Once again, it lay down on the nebula and closed its eyes to take a nap. Lu Yi and Li Shang didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Only when the blue bird lay down again did Lu Yi let out a sigh of relief. He knew that the blue bird had no interest in them at all, and probably only brought them here because it was curious about their star boat. Fortunately, they weren't swallowed by the blue bird. Perhaps it was because the blue bird was full, otherwise, they would have died in vain. Lu Yi slowly turned his head and looked at Li Shang. He gave him a meaningful glance, and Li Shang nodded knowingly. Just as the two of them stealthily prepared to leave while the blue bird was taking a nap, Yaya suddenly jumped up from the star boat with a joyful cry. Lu Yi was shocked and raised his hand to grab her, but Yaya's movements were so fast that Lu Yi couldn't catch her at all. Then he saw Yaya fly to the blue bird's beak and climb all the way up. Judging from her posture, it seemed that she wanted to fly to the bird's head. Lu Ye's blood turned cold again, but soon he found that he was overthinking because Yaya's movements were quite loud, but the blue bird didn't seem to care at all. It just lay there, minding its own business. Even when Yaya stood on the blue bird's head and waved at Lu Yi, the blue bird still didn't respond. It was impossible that such a powerful bird didn't notice anything. Since it didn't respond, it meant that it didn't care about it. Lu Yi had mixed feelings. It seemed that sometimes being too weak wasn't a bad thing. At the very least, the strong wouldn't have any interest in the weak. Let's go and have a look. Lu Yi turned his head and said to Li Shang. At this point, it was useless to be afraid. As he spoke, he flashed out of the star boat and flew up with Li Shang. Soon, they arrived at the blue bird's head. Lu Yi thought that Yaya had called him up because she had found something strange, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Yaya was lying on a feather on the blue bird's head with a comfortable expression. After Lu Yi and Li Shang came up, she patted the side and motioned for Lu Yi to lie down as well. Lu Yi lay down beside her and Li Shang on the other side. Yaya was even happier, holding each of their arms and giggling non-stop. Lu Yi lay down for a while and found nothing mysterious. He stood up again and looked around. Soon, he was attracted by the nebula where the blue bird was lying. This nebula was originally a whole mass, but after it was torn apart by the green bird's sharp claws, it had not been restored. Looking down from this position, the scene looked like a grave that had been split open, and it was pink inside. Thinking about it, Lu Yi asked Li Shang to stay where he was with Yaya, and he flew down. He was still very curious about the mystery of this grave nebula. He didn't have the chance to explore it, but now that he had the chance, he naturally wanted to see it. The grave nebula had been torn apart, and the big worm-like thing inside had been swallowed by the blue bird. There should be no danger. Entering the grave through the huge crack, he saw pink everywhere. Looking from the inside, it was like a fleshy chamber, like the viscera of some creature. Lu Yi could feel that there seemed to be some strange aura left inside. This aura was familiar to him, but he couldn't remember what it was. After looking around for a while, Lu Yi's eyes were quickly attracted by something in a corner of the nebula. The object was several dozen feet long and had signs of being broken. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and understood what it was. It was the broken part of the big insect that the blue bird had swallowed. It looked like the insect's tail. It seemed that although the blue bird had swallowed the big worm, there were still some remnants, but these remnants were too small for the blue bird to be interested in. Lu Yi was very interested. For the blue bird, dozens of feet was indeed small, but for him, it was very big. Walking forward, he came to where the worm's tail was, and the familiar aura became stronger. Lu Yi raised his hand and touched it, finding that it felt like flesh, but what surprised Lu Yi was that this worm's tail seemed to contain an extremely rich and surging energy. With a thought, he urged the power of the talent tree, and invisible roots extended and pierced into the worm's tail. The next moment, Lu Yi showed a look of surprise, because the energy in this broken worm's tail was indeed surging, even beyond his imagination. So far, the resources he had used for his cultivation were nothing more than spirit jade. He had also tried to refine a few spirit crystals, but in comparison, the energy contained in spirit crystals was purer and stronger than spirit jade, but it was far inferior to the energy contained in this worm's tail. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. This was a treasure. This worm's tail could be used as a spirit jade or even a spirit crystal. If converted into spirit crystals, it was estimated that it would be worth millions of pieces. And this was only an insignificant part of it. The blue bird had swallowed the bulk of it. This was only from the Grave Mound Nebula, and the Grave Mound Nebula in the Thousand Mound Grave was difficult to calculate. If every grave mound contained such a treasure, then this place was simply a land of treasures. Lu Yi was a little puzzled. Did the powerhouses in the starry sky not know about the situation here, or did they not know of such a place, or did they not have the ability to obtain it? But no matter what the situation was, this worm's tail was his. Lu Yi was in a good mood. He had never imagined that being sucked here by the blue bird would result in such an astonishing harvest. He tried to put the worm's tail into his storage ring, but he couldn't because it was too big. After inspecting it, he found that the end of the worm's tail was still connected to the nebula. It was probably because of this that the blue bird's tail broke when it swallowed the strange worm. Lu Yi could only take out the Panshan saber and cut the worm's tail into pieces. This was physical work because the worm's tail was very tough. Even the Panshan saber with the divine edge could only do limited damage to it. Lu Yi could only urge the 10,000 tidal waves to create a saw on the Panshan saber's blade, slowly sawing the worm's tail. By the time he had sawed the worm's tail into a dozen pieces and put them all into his storage ring, several days had passed. During this time, Li Shang came down to check once, but seeing that he was busy, he didn't disturb him. It was not until several days later that Lu Yi put away all the worm's tails. After checking around and making sure that there was nothing left, he flew out. Reunited with Li Shang and Yaya, Lu Yi looked at the blue bird under his feet. There was no longer much fear in his heart. Instead, he was full of gratitude to the blue bird. If he wasn't in a hurry to return to the 9 states, he would have stayed here for a while. Maybe he could get some benefits from the blue bird. The blue bird was still sleeping. It seemed that after eating the worm, it needed some time to digest. Lu Yi took Li Shang and Yaya back to the star boat and set off on the way back. End of chapter. Chapter 1559. Along the way, they encountered many nebula burial mounds. However, they did not see any signs of damage. Logically speaking, with the azure bird's previous actions, many of the nebula burial mounds should have been torn apart. However, that was not the case. Lu Yi guessed that the torn nebula burial mounds would slowly heal. 2 months later, the star boat finally left the Thousand Hills burial mounds range. Lu Yi looked at the star map, feeling excited. According to the star map, he only needed to pass through the explosion zone to reach the Jade Conch Galaxy. This showed just how remote the Jade Conch Galaxy was. Lu Yi did not know what the other galaxies were like, but based on the direction he was heading, the closest galaxy to the Jade Conch Galaxy was indefinite. However, the 2 galaxies were separated by 3 regions. The first was the territory of the insect race. Even with the star boat, it took Lu Yi more than 3 months to pass through it. After that was the Thousand Hills burial mound, and then the explosion zone. It also took 3 months to pass through the Thousand Hills burial mound. However, the explosion zone covered a much larger area than the Thousand Hills burial mound. Lu Yi estimated that it would take at least half a year. After passing through the explosion zone, he finally reached the edge of the Jade Conch Galaxy. If he wanted to return to the 9 states, he would have to travel a long way. Unlike the relative safety of the Thousand Hills burial mound, the explosion zone was filled with danger. Even if Ri Zhao accidentally got sucked in, he would be injured if not killed. Fortunately, most of the dangers in the explosion zone could be observed in advance. Thus, he had to be careful when traveling in such a place. After the star boat entered the zone of mayhem, Lu Yi didn't dare to be distracted at all. Instead, he kept a vigilant eye on the surroundings. At first, everything was peaceful. However, a few days later, Lu Yi suddenly discovered unusual movements that were rapidly approaching them from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. When he looked carefully, he saw that there seemed to be something like a tornado coming from that direction. However, it was different from a normal tornado. This tornado that appeared in the starry sky was extremely large, and the area it covered was also extremely terrifying. Many asteroids of various sizes were caught in the tornado, and they spun rapidly. It was a chaotic scene. The word explosion in the chaotic explosion zone referred to the cosmic magnetic explosion. That tornado was not a real tornado, but a manifestation of a force field. It was something similar to a magnetic force field, which was why it was so dangerous. The magnetic force field was simply the nemesis of cultivators. No matter how high one's cultivation was, being in the magnetic force field would be greatly suppressed. Once one was involved in this kind of magnetic explosion, under the premise that it was difficult to exert all of one's strength, it was very likely that one would be unable to resist the impact of the large and small meteorites. Therefore, when traveling in the chaotic explosion zone, one had to follow a principle. They had to stay as close to the dead stars or desolate stars in this area as possible. This way, even if they accidentally encountered such a magnetic storm, they could find a place to hide in time. Upon seeing the tornado-like magnetic storm, Lu Yi took over the steering of the star boat and drove it towards a desolate star in the vicinity. He landed directly on the back of the desolate star, found an isthmus, and went in with Yaya. As for Li Shang, he had already hidden in Lu Ye's spirit sea at the first opportunity. For ordinary cultivators, the magnetic storm was a great threat, but for the soul race, it was simply fatal. Just as he hid, Lu Yi heard a continuous whistling sound pass by his ear. Obviously, the magnetic storm was blowing over. And under the influence of this magnetic explosion, Lu Ye's body could not help but sink, and all his spiritual power seemed to be imprisoned in his body, unable to be activated. In this state, he was just in existence with a relatively strong physical body. Instinctively, he activated the power of the talent tree, wanting to resist the suppression of this magnetic explosion, but Lu Yi soon remembered that the power of the talent tree did not seem to have much effect on this suppression. He had tried this when he was in the 9 states. When he first went deep into the 9 states to investigate the situation of the insect race's great mystic realm, he had borrowed the power of the Dragon Emperor, who could completely isolate the influence of the magnetic field. But what surprised him was that after activating the power of the talent tree, the fuel reserves of the talent tree were rapidly consumed. At the same time, his body became lighter, and the suppression disappeared without a trace. Lu Yi was slightly stunned, but soon understood. The talent tree was not the talent tree of the past. Back when he went deep into the insect race's great mystic realm to investigate, the talent tree had only undergone 1 transformation. Today, it had undergone 3 transformations, and its power was naturally stronger than before. It was just that the price to pay seemed to be a little high. This kind of force field suppression was invisible and continuous, so the talent tree had to maintain a state of incinerating impurities at all times to burn away the invisible force field that invaded the body. Naturally, it would be a heavy burden on the fuel reserves of the talent tree. The fuel reserves of the talent tree now could not withstand such consumption. Instead of using it to resist the suppression of the magnetic explosion, it would be better to use it for cultivation in the Wanxiang Sea. Thinking of this, Lu Yi gently put Yaya down, then summoned the Dragon Emperor to protect himself, and then held Yaya in his arms. Lu Yi could clearly feel that Yaya was also being suppressed by the magnetic field. Her small brows were furrowed, and she looked unhappy. However, she had Rizhao's backing after all, so Lu Yi wasn't sure how much this suppression would affect her. This magnetic explosion lasted for half a day before it was over. Only then did Lu Yi put away the Dragon Emperor and rush out of the isthmus with Yaya in his arms. Looking in the direction of the magnetic explosion, he summoned the planetary boat again and hurried on. Although there were many dead stars and desolate stars in this chaotic explosion zone that could be used as shelter, if one was unlucky and could not find a suitable place to take shelter when the magnetic explosion arrived, it would be equally troublesome. In such a strange place, Li Shang was of no help at all. Ever since he hid in Lu Ye's divine ocean, he had not shown himself. Lu Ye's luck was not bad. He had encountered such magnetic storms several times in a row and found a place to take shelter in time. But there was always a time when one's luck ran out. Once again, he saw a magnetic storm in the distance. Lu Ye hurriedly looked around, but he did not find any traces of dead stars or desolate stars. Seeing that the magnetic storm was about to sweep over, Lu Ye could only grit his teeth and summon the Dragon Emperor again. He then grabbed Yaya and placed her on his chest with one hand, preparing to resist the magnetic storm this time. Instead of dodging, he turned around and faced the magnetic storm head-on. Only by going in the opposite direction could he get out of the range of the magnetic storm more quickly. The huge dragon spine saber had been summoned, and the scarlet figure, which was 30 feet tall, rushed into the magnetic storm. It was like a drop of water falling into the sea, without a single ripple. Before, Lu Ye had been looking for a suitable place to take shelter, and it was difficult for him to understand the horror of this magnetic storm. Now that he was in it himself, he immediately realized how dangerous it was. Being in the middle of it, he soon lost his sense of direction. No matter how hard he tried, he could only follow the direction of the magnetic storm. If that was all, it would be fine. The key was that there were countless meteorites mixed in the magnetic storm. After an unknown period of time, each meteorite was moving at an extremely fast speed. Lu Ye held the dragon spine saber and tried to cut down a few meteorites that were crashing toward him. As a result, his arms were numb from the impact. In a moment of carelessness, he was hit by a huge meteorite. Even with the protection of the Dragon Emperor, Lu Ye's blood was boiling and he saw stars. In the magnetic storm, Lu Ye struggled to move. Under this kind of starry sky, the strength of an individual was too small. After more than 2 hours, Lu Ye still couldn't pass through the magnetic storm. He even wondered if he could pass through it. Being wrapped up in the magnetic storm like this, he often couldn't control himself. Just as Lu Ye was having a headache, he suddenly felt Yaya's aura recover. In the blink of an eye, Yaya's aura was at Yu Yao's level. But that was it. It seemed that the magnetic storm had a great suppressive effect on her. Before Lu Ye could understand what was going on, Yaya grabbed him by the arm and dragged him in a certain direction. There was clearly some urgency on her face. The next moment, Lu Ye felt an extremely frightening suction force coming from another direction. That suction force felt familiar, and then he was surprised to see that the meteorites around him had changed directions and were heading in the direction of the suction force. Yaya's hand was exerting force, and it was obvious that she was fighting against the suction force. But no matter how hard she fought, the two of them, one big and one small, were still slowly being pulled by the suction force. They followed the magnetic storm and slid in the direction of the suction force. The magnetic storm around them was getting smaller and smaller, gradually disappearing into nothingness. The suction force was also extinguished. Lu Ye, who was dizzy and disoriented, saw a pair of eyes shining like the sun. They were staring in his direction. When he looked behind him, he saw a huge bird's head and a bird's body that was as big as a star. It was glowing with a green light. A green bird! Lu Ye was surprised. He didn't expect to see that huge green bird again in this place. But this time, the green bird gave him a different feeling. Last time, the green bird hadn't shown any interest in him. This time, Lu Ye could feel a trace of hostility in its eyes. "Dad, take it off," Yaya suddenly said. She looked a little nervous. Although Lu Ye didn't know what was going on, he hurriedly removed the dragon throne and put it away. The cyan bird stared at him for a while, causing Lu Ye's heart to tremble in fear. Fortunately, the trace of hostility in its eyes slowly disappeared. Then, it slowly turned around and flapped its wings twice, as if to fly away from this area. Lu Ye looked around. The magnetic storm that had enveloped him before had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never been there. The magnetic storm couldn't have disappeared for no reason. Combining his previous experience with the green bird in front of him, Lu Ye had a vague guess. But it was strange that the green bird had come here from the Thousand Hills tomb. Seeing that it was about to flap its wings and leave, Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. He took Yaya and flew onto its back. The next moment, Lu Yi felt the stars move. End of chapter. Chapter 1560. The speed of the blue bird was not something that Lu Yi could compare with when he was driving the star boat. It was at least 10 times faster, and this was when the blue bird was obviously not using its full strength. Lu Yi wondered how fast it would be if it used its full strength. It was hard to tell how strong the blue bird was. The only thing Lu Yi was sure of was that it was stronger than Yaya. After using her full strength, Yaya had indeed weakened again. She curled up in Lu Ye's arms and fell asleep. Lu Yi sat on the back of the blue bird and let it fly him forward. He constantly took out the star chart and compared it with the surrounding stars. When he was caught in the magnetic storm, he had lost his way slightly. It was very troublesome to lose one's way in the starry sky, so he had to quickly find his way back. Fortunately, the star chart given by the reincarnation tree was quite detailed. Lu Yi spent some time to confirm one thing. The direction the blue bird was going was exactly the direction he needed to go. This was not bad. He could hitch a ride. Lu Yi did not see how the magnetic storm disappeared before, but he had some guesses. But after flying with the blue bird for 2 days, he finally saw it with his own eyes. The blue bird seemed to have come here specifically to look for the star magnetic storm. Whenever it found one, it would immediately pounce on it excitedly. Then, it would open its huge beak and swallow the extremely huge tornado into its mouth. Even the meteorites in the star magnetic storm were all swallowed by it. Lu Yi could not figure out where the blue bird came from. It could eat the things in the Tomb of 1,000 Hills, but it could also eat the magnetic storm. In just 10 days, Lu Yi was surprised to find that he was about to pass through the chaotic explosion zone. In his original plan, it would take about half a year to pass through the chaotic explosion zone, and this was the result of the blue bird's occasional delay in swallowing the magnetic storm. If it did not delay, it would be even faster. The blue bird changed its direction, obviously unwilling to leave the chaotic explosion zone so quickly. Seeing this, Lu Yi quickly jumped off its back and watched it leave. In a few breaths, the blue bird's huge figure turned into a small in his field of vision. Lu Yi summoned his star boat again and took Yaya aboard. Following the star chart's guidance, they flew for about 20 days without incident and finally left the chaotic explosion zone. Strictly speaking, they had arrived at the Jade Conch Galaxy, but this was only the border of the Jade Conch Galaxy. Lu Yi was excited. He recalled when he was chased by Tang Jun and accidentally fell into the insect path and entered the Wanxiang Sea. Several years had passed in the blink of an eye. After going through untold hardships, he finally returned to the Jade Conch Galaxy. He didn't know what the situation was like in the 9 prefectures, but before he left, he gave some purple amulets to eldest senior brother and the others. In an environment like Jade Conch, self-preservation shouldn't be a problem. Looking at the starry sky in all directions, Lu Yi found it very strange. Lu Yi had never been to this area, so he naturally could not see the familiar stars. According to the star atlas given by the reincarnation tree, it would take about 4 to 5 months to return to the 9 states from here. This was the tragedy of a cultivator who had just been promoted to a large domain. No matter what they did, the efficiency was very low. It took many generations of accumulation to reach a normal level. But Lu Yi did not plan to return to the 9 provinces directly. This was because this trip back to the Wanxiang Galaxy was not only about the 9 provinces, but also the entire Jade Conch Galaxy. Therefore, he was prepared to make a trip to the Qingli Dao world or the Yulua Dao world to inform them in advance and let them prepare. In this way, when he pulled out the people from the 9 states, he could gather them and set off without wasting any time. However, the star chart given by the reincarnation tree only marked the location of the 9 provinces. Lu Yi did not know where the Qingli Dao world and the Jade Conch domain were. But since everyone was in the same galaxy, there must be cultivators of the 9 provinces wandering outside. If he was lucky, he might meet them. He could ask around and find out. Thinking of this, Lu Yi first flew forward along the route to the 9 provinces. But the further he went, the more disappointed he was. This was because there were many traces of spiritual jades in the starry sky. This meant that there were few or no traces of cultivators of the 9 provinces in this area. Otherwise, these spiritual jades would not continue to exist. Places with abundant spirit jades were usually places where people rarely went. Even astral beasts rarely appeared. Lu Yi was not in the mood to collect those spiritual jades. He was used to being extravagant. 1 or 2 pieces of spiritual jades really did not interest him. If he had the time, he could just go to the Wanxiang Sea and catch a white spirit. It would be worth thousands of spiritual jades. After flying for more than a month, Lu Ye's spirits were finally roused. This was because the further he flew, the fewer traces of spirit jades there were. This meant that there were either star mansions frequently appearing in this place, or there were star beasts active. Sure enough, Lu Yi soon encountered some star beasts. His original expectation inevitably turned into disappointment. A few days later, a bounded domain appeared in front of him. Lu Yi looked at it carefully and found that it was indeed a bounded domain. It was not a dead star or a desolate star. This bounded domain was full of vitality. There must be living creatures active in it. As to what level this bounded domain was, he would have to go deeper to explore it. The only thing he was sure of was that this was not the Qinglidao world or the Jade Conch sector. This was because there were no signs of cultivators of the 9 provinces outside the bounded domain. There were indeed only 3 large bounded domains in the Jade Conch galaxy that could be confirmed. One was the Jade Conch, one was the Qinglidao world, and one was the 9 provinces. But there were far more than 3 bounded domains that were full of vitality. Many bounded domains were simply full of vitality and did not even have living creatures in the traditional sense. Some bounded domains had living creatures, but they were just ordinary animals and plants. Or some bounded domains had reached the level of cultivation, but the level was not high. Just like the blood refining domain, there were active figures of the blood clan in the Divine Sea. But because it had not given birth to any cultivators of the 9 provinces, it was not considered a large bounded domain. There should be some bounded domains like this in the Jade Conch galaxy. Lu Yi was not very clear about the situation of the bounded domain in front of him. After thinking for a while, Lu Yi put away the star boat and rushed toward the bounded domain with Yaya. Since he was passing by, there was no harm in taking a look. After all, it would not take too long. Passing through the thick clouds, Lu Yi immediately saw the scattered cities and villages below. Using his eyesight, he could even see some of the active figures in those cities and villages. This was a bounded domain occupied by the human clan. And from all kinds of signs, the human clan in this bounded domain was actually involved in the level of cultivation. This was because Lu Yi saw some traces of flying spirit boats. He did not feel any hostility from the bounded domain. Presumably, the will of this bounded domain was not very strong. However, Lu Ye's brows slowly furrowed. This was because he vaguely felt that there was something wrong with this bounded domain. Looking from the starry sky, this bounded domain was indeed full of vitality. Logically speaking, it should be a thriving bounded domain. But when he went deep into it, Lu Yi had a strange feeling. He always felt that there was something wrong with this bounded domain. Lu Yi could not figure it out, so he called Li Shang. Li Shang flashed out from his divine sea and checked carefully. She nodded and said, "There is indeed something wrong." But as for what the problem was, she could not tell. She looked at Yaya in Lu Ye's arms and asked softly, "Yaya, did you find anything?" She and Lu Yi were only constellations. It was normal for them to have poor eyesight. Although Yaya's mind was damaged, she still had the foundation of sunshine. Perhaps she could see something. Yaya bit her thumb and pointed in a direction. "There's something there." "What is it?" Lu Yi asked quickly. "I don't know." Yaya shook her head and then looked in another direction. She said happily, "Daddy, it's so lively there. Let's go there." Lu Yi had long noticed the liveliness there. He did not know what day it was, but all the cities in the entire bounded domain and even the places where people gathered were decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Especially the city that Yaya pointed to, there were many people gathered there. Seeing Yaya's interest, Lu Yi did not want to disappoint her. He said, "Then let's go." After traveling in the starry sky for so long, Lu Yi also wanted to join in the fun. Yaya was even happier. She climbed onto Lu Ye's shoulder like a monkey and rode on his neck. Lu Yi flew over in a flash, Li Shang following closely by his side. Although there were cultivators in this bounded domain, the highest level was only at the true lake realm. Lu Yi and Li Shang deliberately hid themselves. How could those people notice? Soon they entered the city. The city was bustling with activity. Everyone was happy as if it was the new year. Lu Yi spread out his spiritual will and listened attentively. He slowly understood what was going on. This realm was called the Clear Wind Realm. Every 10 years, there would be cultivators from the upper realm who would come to pick suitable cultivators and bring them to the upper realm for cultivation. Every year, it was the grandest festival in the Clear Wind Realm. Firstly, it was to welcome the arrival of the cultivators from the upper realm. Secondly, it was to select the best cultivators in this realm. What surprised Lu Yi was that according to the conversations of the cultivators in this world, the so-called upper world was actually the Qingli Daoist world. What a coincidence! Lu Yi had been looking for cultivators from the Qingli Dao realm or the Yuluo realm in the starry sky. In the end, he could not find them after a month. He accidentally passed by the Clear Wind Realm and found out about the Qingli Dao realm. From this point of view, the Clear Wind Realm was the lower realm of the Qingli Dao realm. It was a subordinate realm of the Qingli Dao realm, just like the relationship between the blood refining realm and the 9 states. There were no more blood kindred in the blood refining realm. There were only a large number of humans living there. The major sects in the 9 states had divided a part of the territory. The good cultivators born in those territories had the opportunity to be brought to the 9 states to cultivate. Although the method was different from here, the results were the same. It was just to select the best talents. End of chapter. Chapter 1561. The people from the Qingli Dao world would be here in 3 days to pick up a batch of cultivators. Since that was the case, he only needed to wait here for 3 days, and then he would be able to rush back with the people from the Qingli Dao world. With that in mind, Lu Yi turned his head and saw Li Shang and Yaya standing in front of a stall, one big and one small, holding something in their hands, cheeks puffed up, eating happily. Lu Yi walked up and found that the stall seemed to be selling something like tonghalu, but the fruit on the tonghalu was obviously not an ordinary fruit, but a kind of bright red spirit fruit. The big one and the small one ate very quickly. In a few bites, they finished a skewer. In a few bites, another skewer. When Lu Yi came over, both of them were holding a skewer in their hands. Lu Yi was a little puzzled. It was normal for Yaya to be like this, she was just a child, but why was Li Shang like this, and she was a soul? Was it okay to eat these things? As if noticing Lu Ye's gaze, Li Shang's face was slightly red. He deliberately avoided looking at him and ate more vigorously. The stall owner opposite them was beaming with joy. In a moment, the tonghalu was eaten clean by Li Shang and Yaya. The stall owner said, 362 high-grade spirit stones. The things he sold were not very popular, mainly because the price was a little expensive. He sold a few sticks after a few days, but he did not expect 2 big customers to come and buy it all. He was naturally happy. Li Shang and Yaya licked the sugar stains on their lips together, then turned to look at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was looking around. When he reacted, his expression could not help but stiffen. They obviously wanted him to pay the bill. But they were already in the constellation realm, who would have spirit stones on them. As early as when he ascended to the constellation realm, Lu Yi left the things he did not need in the treasury of the Jade Blood sect. Yaya did not have anything. He did not expect her to pay the bill, and Li Shang did not seem to have anything like a storage ring, but he could use other things to pay the bill, such as spirit treasures or spirit pills. But the strongest cultivator in the Qingfeng realm was only Zhen Hu. Lu Ye's spirit treasures were all top level. Even if he took them out, the people of the Qingfeng realm would not be able to use them, not to mention spirit pills that could be used by the constellation realm. Zhen Hu would not end well if he took them. He couldn't possibly dine and dash, right? The stall owner seemed to be able to see Lu Ye's dilemma and his face darkened. Dear customer, if you do not pay for your food in the Clear Breeze City, you will have to consider the consequences. In order to welcome the arrival of the great cultivators from the upper realm 3 days later, the security in Clear Wind City could be said to be extremely tight. Anyone who dared to cause trouble would be sentenced to death. Therefore, although there were many cultivators gathered in Clear Wind City at this time, no one dared to disobey the rules. "Wait a moment," Lu Yi said, his figure flickering and disappearing. That stall owner was stunned. Even though his cultivation level wasn't very high, it was still at the level of Yunhe. Yet, he couldn't see how Lu Yi disappeared. He immediately understood that Lu Ye's cultivation level was much higher than his, and was most likely a peak true lake stage cultivator. At the same time, on the west side of Qingfeng City, in the encampment of the Xinjiang sect, the Xinjiang sect's leader, Zhu Shang, looked to the side with a serious expression. Beside him were the elders of the Xinjiang sect. At this moment, all the elders were watching nervously. In front of these people, there was a woman in her 20s sitting upright. Her face was red and hot steam was rolling off her body. She looked like she was about to be cooked. Beside her, there were 2 cultivators dressed like medical cultivators who were treating her injuries. After spitting out the blood, the woman's condition improved slightly, but that was all. "How is it?" Zhu Shang asked nervously. One of the medical cultivators shook his head and said, "Zhu Yu was injured by yang fire. If the yang fire is not removed, it will be very difficult for her to recover. However, Sect Master can rest assured that her life is no longer in danger. As long as we bring her back and slowly recuperate, she will definitely recover within half a year." Hearing this, Zhu Shang didn't look happy. Instead, his body swayed as if he was struck by lightning. Half a year. The cultivators from the upper world would arrive in 3 days. The grand competition of this realm was also in full swing. How could they make it in half a year? The cultivators from the upper world would only come to the Qingfeng realm once every 10 years. The grand competition of this realm was also held once every 10 years. According to the rules set by the cultivators from the upper world, preparations had started half a year ago. The 3 levels of Lingxi, Yunhe, and True Lake would compete. In the end, the top 10 of each level would be chosen. A total of 30 people would be able to leave with the cultivators from the upper world to cultivate in the upper world. In the Qingfeng realm, the Xinjiang sect could be considered one of the major sections. However, in this generation, the disciples from the Lingxi and Yunhe levels did not perform well. Only Zhu Yu from the True Lake realm had appeared. She had a high chance of competing for the top 10 positions. In the end, she was injured in the battle just now. If it was a normal injury, it would be fine. However, Zhu Yu's injury was very serious. There was no possibility of her continuing to participate in the grand competition. To be accepted into the upper world to cultivate was the dream of all cultivators in the Qingfeng realm. For the sects of the winners, it was a rare honor. Not only could they obtain rich resources from the cultivators from the upper world, if their disciples could establish themselves in the upper world in the future, they could also repay the sect. Therefore, the major sects of the Qingfeng realm attached great importance to this grand competition. It could be said that any disciple who had a chance of winning would receive great nurturing and expectations. Zhu Yu was only 1 step away from the final victory. In the end, she fell here. Naturally, Zhu Shang and the group of elders were heartbroken. "Sect Master, now that things have come to this, we can only wait for the next 10 years. Fortunately, Zhu Yu is still young. Even if another 10 years pass, she won't lose her qualifications," an elder consoled. Zhu Shang's expression was bitter. Indeed, now that things had come to this, the Xinjiang sect was powerless to reverse the situation. They could only wait for the next 10 years and hope that their disciples would perform better. "Do you need help?" An unfamiliar voice suddenly rang out. The group could not help but be startled. When they looked up, they were all shocked. This was because an unfamiliar young man had appeared here without them noticing. It was as if he had been standing there the whole time. However, before he spoke, no one noticed him. Immediately, an elder-level True Lake cultivator shouted angrily, "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the Xinjiang sect's territory?" However, the young man did not seem to hear him. He only looked at Zhu Shang and said, "I can cure her. But I need some spirit stones. High-grade spirit stones. The elder who spoke earlier said sternly, "Ignorant brat, how dare you speak so arrogantly? Take him down." The two medical cultivators who treated Zhu Yu earlier were the two strongest medical cultivators in the sect. They were famous in the entire Clearwind realm. However, even they could only save Zhu Yu's life. This young man who suddenly appeared had a saber at his waist. He looked experienced and was dressed like a weapon cultivator. How could he know how to save people? At his command, the cultivators of the Xingyang sect were about to move. However, Zhu Shang raised his hand. "Everyone stop." He stared at Lu Yi and said in a low voice, "You know how to save people? I can save her." Lu Yi looked at Zhu Yu and scanned her with his divine sense. He already knew the situation in her body. If it were not for the fact that he needed spirit stones to pay, he would not have bothered to interfere. To think that he, a late-stage constellation cultivator, would have to worry about spirit stones one day. If others knew about this, they would laugh their heads off. It was truly a case of a hero who was stumped by money. If you can't cure her in half a day, then it's meaningless. Zhu Shang continued. Half a day later, Zhu Yu would participate in the next competition. "I don't need half a day." As Lu Yi said this, he directly walked up to Zhu Yu and patted her on the shoulder. Zhu Shang instinctively wanted to stop him, but he could not hold himself back. The main reason was that he could not see through Lu Ye's background. Moreover, Lu Yi looked so calm and at ease, as if he was really confident. Their sect was already out of ideas. Since the other party was so confident, there was no harm in giving it a try. Lu Yi did not even circulate his spiritual power. He only slightly activated the power of his talent tree and scanned it along the flow of spiritual power in Zhu Yu's body. After the talent tree had undergone 3 transformations, Lu Yi knew that the talent tree could not only burn away the impurities that had invaded his body, but could also burn away the impurities in other people's bodies. However, he still needed to control it carefully, so as to avoid hurting others instead of saving them. Zhu Yu's situation was nothing more than yang fire entering her body. Even if another force had invaded her body, the talent tree could naturally burn it all away. Originally, under the treatment of the two medical cultivators, Zhu Yu's condition had improved slightly, but it was only a slight improvement. But at this moment, with Lu Ye's palm, Zhu Yu's flushed cheeks quickly returned to normal, and her difficult expression became peaceful. Her originally hot body no longer had the slightest abnormality. The cultivators of the Xingyang sect were dumbfounded. Even though they did not know the exact situation, they knew from Zhu Yu's change that Lu Ye's method was effective. But how was this possible? Such a method was simply amazing. The medical cultivator in particular looked with all his might, trying to find some clues, but he could not find anything. Lu Yi casually took out a spiritual pill and scraped some pill powder from it. He pinched open Zhu Yu's mouth and gently blew the pill powder into her mouth. Only then did he take 2 steps back and say, "Rest for a while. You should be fine." The cultivators of the Xingyang sect were dumbfounded. After a while, Zhu Shang ordered the 2 medical cultivators, "Examine her." The 2 medical cultivators seemed to have just woken up from a dream. They hurried forward and examined her. Both of them were shocked. After a while, one of them said, "Sect Master, Zhu, she's fine." They looked at Lu Yi, who was on the side, and were almost shocked to the core. Zhu Shang laughed loudly. His previous dejection was swept away, and he looked at Lu Yi. "Fellow Taoist," Lu Yi stretched out his hand. "My reward." Zhu Shang's words were interrupted, but he didn't care. He quickly took out a storage ring. Then he looked for a group of elders nearby, and poured all the spirit stones he had into the storage ring. Then he handed it over to Lu Yi. Lu Yi took it without a word. Chapter 1562. Sect Master, Zhu Yu is awake. The medical cultivator suddenly exclaimed. Zhu Shang quickly went forward to check. Sure enough, Zhu Yu slowly opened her eyes. She didn't look too tired or weak. Instead, her eyes were full of energy. How do you feel?" Zhu Shang asked nervously. Zhu Yu said, "I'm fine." who saved me just now. Although she was a little unconscious, as a cultivator, she could still sense something. She knew that the person who saved her wasn't from the Xinjiang sect. It's this fellow cultivator. Zhu Shang looked back as he spoke, but Lu Yi was nowhere to be seen. No one noticed when Lu Yi disappeared, just like how he suddenly appeared. In front of the street stall, Lu Yi hurried back to pay the stall owner's bill. Then he took Li Shang and Yaya to wander around. He had a lot of spirit stones, so he wasn't afraid of them. As they walked past, Li Shang bought a lot of trinkets for Yaya and dressed her up beautifully. He also bought a few new sets of clothes for her. After changing into the new clothes, Yaya looked even cuter. Lu Yi was bored as he followed the two of them. He wished that a moon jade star beast would appear in front of him and fight. Half a day later, Lu Ye's eyes lit up because someone blocked his way. It was an elder from the Xinjiang sect. Judging by his posture, he was obviously here to find him. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi asked. The elder bowed first and then said, "Please forgive me for disturbing you. The sect master of the Xinjiang sect is grateful for your saving grace, so he specially ordered us to find you. Please do come and stay at the Xinjiang sect's encampment for a while." Lu Yi was delighted. This person from the Xinjiang sect came at the right time. He nodded and said, "Since your sect master invited me, then lead the way." He looked at Li Shang. "Let's go together?" Li Shang snorted. "Go by yourself. I'll take Yaya around." With that, he pulled Yaya's little hand and squeezed into the crowd. Lu Yi didn't understand what was so interesting about a place at the true lake level. The Xinjiang sect elder said, "Don't worry, fellow cultivator. I'll immediately send a female disciple to follow Madam and your daughter. Our Xinjiang sect will bear all their expenses in Qingfeng City." Lu Yi nodded. "Thank you." The other party was clearly expressing goodwill and had even helped him out of his predicament. Lu Yi naturally had no need to refuse. The elder immediately took out a communication device and gave a few instructions. Only then did he lead Lu Yi to the Xinjiang sect's encampment. He appeared very humble along the way. Lu Yi guessed that the other party must have noticed something. Although he deliberately didn't use his spiritual qi and didn't want to expose his cultivation level, the other party wasn't a fool. It was impossible that they didn't notice. Originally, when he learned that Lu Yi had come, Zhu Shang had immediately ordered a banquet to be prepared, but Lu Yi had no intention of attending. He was just a constellation, so he really had nothing to talk about with a bunch of true lake cultivators. It was not that he looked down on them, but they were at different realms and had different experiences, so they could not talk to each other. If he had the time, he might as well refine a few pieces of spiritual jade and just ask the Xinjiang sect to prepare a quiet room for him. The Xinjiang sect did not dare to be negligent. Lu Yi was soon led into a quiet room. The people from the Qingli Taoist world would only arrive 3 days later, so he decided to hide here for 3 days. As for Li Shang and Yaya, he didn't have to worry at all. If he wanted to find them, he could just send a message. Refining the spiritual jade and deducing the spiritual inscriptions. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. There was still no news from Li Shang. He was probably having fun with Yaya. Outside the quiet room, a woman hesitated. It was Zhu Yu, who had been saved by Lu Yi. When she woke up, Lu Yi had already disappeared. Now that she knew that her savior was here, she naturally wanted to thank him in person. However, Lu Yi was meditating, so she didn't want to disturb him. Every time after participating in the competition, she would wait here to see if there was a chance. She was puzzled. Was the person here really a cultivator from the upper world? The reason why she had such an idea was not because she saw anything, but because it was Zhu Shang's guess. Although the Qingfeng realm was only a realm at the level of the true lake, because it was a subordinate realm of the Qingli Taoist world, many cultivators from this realm were taken to the Qingli Taoist world. Therefore, the cultivators of the Qingfeng realm were not ignorant of the higher level of cultivation. Previously, in order to help Zhu Yu recover as soon as possible, Lu Yi took a healing elixir and scraped some powder. Zhu Shang saw it and was extremely shocked. Because the elixir that Lu Yi took out was very similar to the elixir used by the cultivators of the constellations. Coupled with Lu Ye's magical means, Zhu Shang naturally had some ideas. Under normal circumstances, the cultivators from the upper world would only arrive in the Qingfeng realm the next day. However, no one stipulated that they had to do so. It was normal for them to arrive a few days earlier or later. Right now, there were already traces of a great cultivator from the upper realm in the Cool Breeze realm. He even came here to save Zhu. Zhu Shang couldn't help but misunderstand. He wondered if this great cultivator from the upper realm had taken a fancy to Zhu herself or her aptitude and wanted to bring her to the upper realm. That was why he came to help. However, no matter the situation, it was always right to build a good relationship with them in advance. Therefore, he instructed Zhu to find an opportunity to thank Lu Yi in person. Unfortunately, since Lu Yi came here, he had been staying in the quiet room and did not show up. Even if Zhu wanted to see him, she could not do so. After waiting for a while, seeing that the next round of competition was about to begin, Zhu was about to leave. However, at this moment, the door of the quiet room suddenly opened. Then, an unfamiliar young face appeared in her sight. Zhu was delighted and quickly bowed down. Zhu from the Xinjiang sect greets Taoist brother. Thank you for your help. Lu Yi glanced at her and said, "Come with me." As he said this, he walked out. Although Zhu was confused, she still followed him closely. Soon, they were out of the main hall where the quiet room was located. Lu Yi activated his spiritual energy and wrapped it around Zhu, then shot into the sky. Zhu exclaimed in shock. She finally confirmed that this young man who looked younger than her was indeed a great cultivator from the upper realm. This was because the spiritual energy waves on his body were something she had never felt before. It was incomparably dense and solid. Even a peak true lake cultivator like her was as insignificant as an ant in front of him. This commotion also alarmed the group of people from the Xinjiang sect. However, when they came out to investigate, Lu Yi and Zhu were nowhere to be seen. After some questioning, they found out that the two of them had shot into the sky for some unknown reason. In mid-air, Lu Yi flew rapidly in a direction. With the protection of his spiritual energy, although Zhu would not be in any danger, his shocking speed still made her tremble in fear. Have there been any shocking changes in the 3,500-kilometer distance? Lu Yi asked as he flew. The reason why he suddenly walked out of the quiet room was that he had sensed some abnormalities. Just now, he suddenly felt that the foundation of the entire Clear Wind realm was rapidly slipping away. Moreover, there were some strange movements coming from the depths of the ground. Because it was too far away, the true lake cultivators of this realm could not sense it. Only a constellation like him could sense it. He did not know what was going on. He happened to see Zhu at the door, so he brought her over to ask about it. After all, Zhu was a cultivator of this realm, so she should have some understanding of the situation there. Hearing this, Zhu made some calculations and said, "There have not been any shocking changes, but there is an abyss there." Abyss? What's so special about it? There doesn't seem to be anything special. The cultivators of this realm once went deep to investigate, but they did not find anything unusual. The investigation of a true lake cultivator was not accurate. After all, their strength was limited. Moreover, the depths of the ground was the area where the magnetic field raged. The deeper the cultivator went, the greater the suppression. It seemed that the cultivators of this realm could only investigate a limited depth. Did the people of the Qing Li Dao world investigate? Lu Yi asked. There were no abnormalities, so they did not dare to trouble the great cultivators of the upper realm, Zhu said. Lu Yi nodded and did not ask any more questions. However, he was sure that there was definitely something unusual there. When he first came to the Clear Wind realm, Yaya said that there was something there. However, the topic was changed at that time, so Lu Yi did not delve into it. Glancing at him, Zhu asked carefully, "Brother, aren't you a cultivator of the Qing Li Dao world?" Lu Yi's question made her realize something. "I'm just passing by," Lu Yi explained casually. More than 3,000 miles, they arrived in a short time. Sure enough, there was a huge abyss here, like a crack in the ground. Zhu had not recovered from the feeling of traveling at lightning speed when she realized that they had arrived at the place. Only then did she realize how terrifying Lu Yi's cultivation was. Stay here and wait, Lu Yi ordered. Then he leaped down into the abyss and dove down. Zhu Yu did not dare to rashly go in, so she waited there obediently. At this moment, there was movement from the musical note. After a brief investigation, she found that it was her father, Zhu Shang, who had sent her a message, asking her what had happened. Zhu Yu explained briefly. Zhu Shang smiled bitterly and said, "So, although he is a cultivator of the upper realm, he is not of the upper realm? He said he was just passing by." "Then it's over." "What's wrong, father? The competition has already begun. How can you make it back in time?" Zhu Yu was stunned. Only then did she realize that she seemed to have missed the competition. More than 3,000 miles was nothing to Lu Yi, but to her, a true lake, it was not a short distance. Even if she rushed back now, she would not be able to go on stage. In the abyss, Lu Yi continued to go down. Gradually, there was no light around, and the magnetic field became stronger. However, the clear wind realm's foundation was limited, so the magnetic field here was not strong. Even an ordinary constellation would not be suppressed too much, not to mention that he had the protection of the talent tree. The movement from below became more and more obvious. It seemed to be the sound of drums, but if one listened carefully, it seemed to be a strange heartbeat, thumping non-stop. Chapter 1563. At this point, the movement from the depths of the ground was extremely obvious. Many true lake cultivators in the clear wind realm felt it and were all shocked. No one knew what was going on. In the abyss, Lu Yi was still going deeper. The abyss was extremely deep. At first, it was wide, but the further he went, the narrower it became. Halfway down, it was almost impossible for people to pass. There was no way forward. Lu Yi could only pull out his Panshan saber and break through the obstacles in front of him. After an unknown distance, Lu Yi suddenly felt that the obstacles in front of him were empty. A scorching aura rushed towards him and he fell into a space. As far as the eye could see, the magma here was rolling and flowing. Bubbles of various sizes emerged from the magma and continued to explode endlessly. This place was the core of the clear wind realm. Even if the clear wind realm was only a true lake-level realm, the environment here was extremely harsh. It was not a place where ordinary cultivators could stay. Not to mention the chaotic origin magnetic field, even the scorching heat could not be resisted by non-constellations. However, Lu Yi was like a spring breeze. If he wanted, he could activate the power of the talent tree to devour the scorching heat from all directions and store it in the talent tree as fuel. However, this would be a loss to the realm. Moreover, the scorching heat here was not of a high level. Even if Lu Yi devoured it, the benefits would be limited. The thumping sounds became more and more obvious. It was coming from the lava. Standing here, the feeling of the realm's foundation flowing and disappearing became even clearer. It was as if there was a bottomless pit under the lava, crazily devouring the foundation of the realm. Could it be that kind of thing? Lu Yi had some guesses, but before he saw it, he could not make a judgment. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the lava. The talent tree protected him and the invisible roots wrapped around him, isolating the scorching lava outside. Lu Yi continued to go deeper. After a while, he frowned because he felt a strange life force from the depths of the lava. Following the life force, Lu Yi soon arrived at the source of the abnormality. Looking over with rapt attention, what appeared in front of him was an egg that was about 10 meters tall. It was oval-shaped and the eggshell looked like a stone. However, it was obviously not a real stone. The surface of the eggshell was filled with complicated patterns. As the foundation of the cool breeze realm was continuously devoured, the patterns on the surface of the eggshell were also constantly flashing. The vitality within the egg was also constantly increasing. It really was that thing. As soon as Lu Yi saw this egg-like thing, he knew that his guess was right. After all, in this world, only this thing would use the foundation of a domain to hatch its own offspring. The World Eater Beast was a very peculiar star beast. Generally speaking, star beasts were not much of a threat to realms. Regardless of whether they were strong or weak, most of them only lived in the starry sky. This was because star beasts were not interested in low-level realms, and it was dangerous to offend high-level realms. However, not all star beasts were like this. There were always some star beasts that posed a huge threat to the realm. Just like the heaven-desired demonic spider that Lu Yi had encountered before, that kind of star beast required a large amount of flesh and blood as a medium for reproduction, so once it was time for them to reproduce, they would look for a suitable domain to invade. The destruction of many realms for no reason was closely related to this kind of star beast. The World Eater beast didn't need flesh and blood as a medium to reproduce, but it needed to devour the foundation of a realm as nutrients. Therefore, it needed to find a realm with vitality and foundation. After finding a suitable realm, the realm-devouring beast would place its eggs inside the realm and quietly devour the realm's resources so that its offspring could hatch. This process was very secretive and generally speaking, it was very difficult to be discovered. When Lu Yi first came to the Clear Wind realm, although he sensed that something was wrong with this realm, he couldn't figure out what exactly was wrong. This was the reason. At this time, the World Eater beast's eggs were about to hatch, and the commotion was too big, so he noticed it. According to the records in Rest Abyss Pavilion, even if he left it alone, this realm wouldn't suffer too much of a disaster. At most, it would lose a part of its foundation. After the World Eater beast's offspring hatched, it would naturally leave this realm. It could be said that the World Eater beast was the natural enemy of all realms that weren't strong enough. The foundation that was devoured by the World Eater beast would most likely take hundreds or thousands of years to accumulate. This time, Lu Yi could leave it alone, but what about the next time? What if the World Eater beast targeted the 9 provinces or its subordinate realms after it grew up? Therefore, in this starry sky, no matter which race's cultivators, if they encountered a World Eater beast, they would kill it to prevent its reproduction from hindering the growth of the realm in their galaxy. Moreover, compared to other star beasts, the World Eater beast's crystal core was extremely valuable. It was far more valuable than the crystal cores of ordinary star beasts. Lu Yi could sense that the World Eater beast in the egg had already taken shape and was about to hatch. As if it had sensed his hostility, the World Eater beast in the egg was twisting uneasily. It exerted all its strength to squeeze the eggshell, causing cracks to appear on the eggshell. Just as Lu Yi was observing the World Eater beast's egg, outside the Clear Wind realm, a starboat was slowly flying toward this realm. This starboat was not small in size. It had 2 floors and 4 large words were engraved on the hull of the starboat. It was the Qing Li Dao world. This was obviously the starboat of the Qing Li Dao world. 3 figures stood on the deck, 2 men and 1 woman. One of them was a middle-aged man who had a late-stage constellation realm cultivation. The other man and woman were younger and only had a mid-stage constellation realm cultivation. The 3 of them came from the Qing Li Dao world. They were cultivators who came to the Clear Wind realm to receive the seeds of cultivation. They were from one of the 3 top forces of the Qing Li Dao world. They had arrived one day early. The grand competition in the Clear Wind realm had not ended. However, this was not a problem. It was difficult to strictly grasp the exact time when traveling in the starry sky. This is the Clear Wind realm? The female cultivator looked at the realm in front of her with a curious expression. Although she had known about the Clear Wind realm and the existence of other realms since she was cultivating, this was the first time she had seen a realm that was so full of vitality. The realms she had seen before were basically desolate stars or dead stars. Junior Sister Tang, is this your first time here? The mid-stage constellation realm cultivator standing beside the female cultivator smiled slightly. Although the Clear Wind realm is a small realm and does not have a strong foundation, it has its own unique charm. Since you are here, you must take a good look. The female cultivator smiled. It is indeed my first time here. However, before I came, Senior Brother Li told me a lot about the Clear Wind realm. Therefore, I am quite familiar with this place. The Senior Brother Li she was talking about was from the Clear Wind realm. 300 years ago, he was brought to the Qing Li Dao world and entered her sect to cultivate. Now, he was already a late-stage constellation realm cultivator with extraordinary potential. There were still some people like Senior Brother Li in the Qing Li Dao world. They were all scattered among the major sections. When the two of them were talking, the middle-aged man who was the leader remained silent. When the two of them finished, he said, "The rules of the Clear Wind Realm Grand Competition were set by ancestor Yu Yao nearly 1,000 years ago. No matter which senior brother or senior sister you received before coming here, we will only receive you based on the results of the competition. There must not be any personal relationships. Do you understand?" There were also feelings in the cultivation world. Those cultivators who were once brought to the Qing Li Dao world and had extraordinary cultivation now cared about their old sex in the Clear Wind realm. It was normal for them to bring some people to the Qing Li Dao world. However, this could not be set as a precedent. Otherwise, if everyone brought people to the Qing Li Dao world privately, they would lose the original intention of selecting talents from the lower worlds. It was precisely because of this consideration that the cultivators who came to receive them were all from the Qing Li Dao world. This was to prevent favoritism. "Understood, Senior Brother Zhou." The two of them replied in unison. Senior Brother Zhou was about to say something more when his expression suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked in a direction. He shouted, "Who are you, demon?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped out. In the center of his palm, a dazzling golden light suddenly exploded. This sudden turn of events shocked the two middle-stage constellation realm experts. When they instinctively looked over, they saw a thick and long tail eerily appear where the golden light shone, and soundlessly coiled towards the planetary ship they were on. The two of them were shocked. Obviously, they did not expect to encounter an attack here. If Senior Brother Zhou was not vigilant enough to notice it in advance, they might have fallen into the enemy's trap. The tail was not a normal tail. The thick and long tail suddenly spread out in the shape of a fan, as if it had turned into a fish tail. The fish tail slapped down heavily. Senior Brother Zhou's hasty attack was scattered, and the planetary ship shook violently from the impact. The two mid-stage constellation cultivators were about to help when Senior Brother Zhou exclaimed, "Be careful, there's more than one." As soon as he finished speaking, another tail appeared strangely. It seemed to be bigger than the previous one. Once again, it slapped the planetary ship. At this moment, the three from Qing Li Daojia finally saw what was attacking them. They were two star beasts that looked like rays. They were huge and flat, with a ferocious mouth on their abdomens. Their fangs were crisscrossed, and they had long tails on their backs. They looked like giant dragons. Senior Brother Zhou was more experienced and knowledgeable. He recognized the two star beasts at a glance. He exclaimed, "Realm Eater Beasts." And they were two late-stage constellation Realm Eater Beasts. He immediately knew that they were in big trouble this time. If it was an ordinary star beast, a cultivator would have nothing to fear if they fought against someone of the same level. However, the World Eater Beast was different. It had the ability to constantly change between illusion and reality. Earlier, the cultivators had failed to detect its presence because the World Eater Beast was in an illusory state. It was invisible to the naked eye and could not be harmed by ordinary means. Although he was strong, it was already difficult for him to deal with one Realm Eater Beast. Even if the other two joined forces, they might not be able to defeat the other Realm Eater Beast. What puzzled him was why the Realm Eater Beasts would appear here. It seemed that either the Realm Eater Beasts were preparing to lay their eggs here, or they had already laid their eggs. Now that their offspring had hatched, they came to welcome their offspring. Chapter 1564. It was very likely that the latter was the case. Senior Brother Zhou judged in his heart. If these two World Eater Beasts were only here to lay eggs, they probably wouldn't take the initiative to attack them. The World Eater Beasts weren't violent star beasts, unless they were protecting their offspring. In other words, their offspring were incubating in the Clear Wind realm, which was why they were obstructing their entry. Senior Brother Zhou shouted, "I'll lure the big one away first, then I'll think of a way to support you. Hold on." He was also a veteran in battle, so he immediately thought of a plan to defeat the enemy. The only way to defeat one World Eater Beast was if the three of them worked together. Therefore, they had to lure one away first. As the battle started, because it was close enough to the Clear Wind realm, the rumbling sound immediately spread into the realm. Countless cultivators in the realm didn't know what was going on. They looked up but couldn't see any clues. There were only flashes of light that cut through the sky like thunder. In the magma of the Earth's core, Lu Yi looked at the world-eater beast that was about to hatch and slowly pulled out the Pan-Shan saber. He suddenly remembered that when the small world-eater beast hatched, its parents would definitely come to pick it up on time. Therefore, if he guessed correctly, there were probably two big world-eater beasts waiting outside the clear wind realm. Almost at the same time when Lu Yi pulled out the Pan-Shan saber, the egg of the world-eater beast suddenly shattered. Then, a figure rushed out and pounced on Lu Yi. Obviously, the newly hatched world-eater beast had sensed something and instinctively attacked first. However, it had just hatched, so its aura was at most equivalent to a true lake realm cultivator. Even if it attacked violently, it wouldn't be a threat to Lu Yi because of the huge gap in strength. He stood there without moving. With a slash of his saber, the small world-eater beast was split into two. Lu Yi put away his saber and reached out his hand to grab a crystal core from the small world-eater beast's corpse. He pondered for a moment and raised his eyebrows. Just as the rumors said, the crystal core of a world-eater beast was completely different from the crystal cores of ordinary star beasts. The energy contained in this crystal core was almost the same as the foundation of a realm. After all, the world-eater beast could hatch because it swallowed the foundation of a realm. In other words, if the crystal core was broken and the energy released, the foundation of the realm could be improved. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then reached out and crushed the crystal core. Although he could bring this crystal core back to the 9 prefectures and let little 9 devour it to benefit the 9 prefectures, this thing was the condensation of the foundation of the clear wind realm after all. It was not easy to bring it away, lest it delay the development of this realm for hundreds or thousands of years. Almost at the moment Lu Yi crushed the crystal core, he suddenly felt an extremely weak power fluctuation coming from above his head. Now that he was at the core of the earth, he could still feel the energy fluctuations. It was clearly extraordinary. He immediately understood that the parents of the small world-devouring beast must have come. With a push of his spiritual power, he hastily rushed out. He was secretly annoyed that he had forgotten to leave the imperial equipment outside before coming in. Otherwise, he would only need to construct a void to return, and there would be no need to go through so much trouble. When he emerged from the abyss, he immediately saw Zhu Yu, who was waiting here, looking up with a face full of shock. Zhu Yu was not the only one looking up. At this very moment, almost everyone in the cool wind realm was watching this unbelievable scene. In the sky, there was a creature that looked like a giant ray that was crazily moving around. On the left and right of this ray, there were two figures that were tightly entangled with it. No one knew what was going on. This ray fish-like creature and the two figures suddenly fought their way into the cool wind realm. Their fight was earth-shattering, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. But soon, the cultivators of the cool wind realm realized that the one fighting the ray fish must be a great cultivator from the upper realm. No one would appear at this time except for a great cultivator from the upper realm. But what made them feel despair was that the two great cultivators from the upper realm had already displayed their mysterious abilities, but they were still no match for the ray fish creature. The two great cultivators from the upper realm, one male and one female, had undoubtedly used all their strength, but they were both bleeding profusely. Sun Yi and Tang Xiaoye were also in despair. Previously, they had followed senior brother Zhou Dingtian's instructions and joined forces to fight the world-devouring beast. They had wanted to buy time and wait for senior brother Zhou to return so that they could join forces. But in the end, the world-devouring beast had gone crazy and suddenly became extremely irritable, rushing towards the cool wind realm. Naturally, the two of them didn't know that the world-devouring beast had suddenly become irritable because it sensed that its offspring had been killed. If they were only fighting the beast, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if they wanted to stop this violent world-devouring beast, it was beyond their abilities. After forcefully fighting a few times, their breathing became chaotic and their blood boiled. Senior brother's son, we can't stop it. Tang Xiaoye activated one of her spirit treasures. It was a handkerchief-like spirit treasure that stuck to the world-devouring beast's body. It originally had the suppressive force of a mountain, but under the violent resistance of the world-devouring beast, the light on the handkerchief-like spirit treasure began to dim. It would probably break in a few breaths of time. Sun Ye's forehead was sweating. He could tell that something was wrong with the world-devouring beast. If he and Tang Xiaoye retreated now, they would probably be fine. But if such a star beast rushed into the cool wind realm, it was hard to say how many casualties it would cause. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to give up so easily. He summoned a huge hammerhead spirit treasure. Holding it high with both hands, he smashed it at the world-devouring beast with the force of a mountain. His spiritual energy madly poured into the spirit treasure. The cultivators of the cool wind realm saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The hammerhead suddenly became as big as a mountain. It shone with a dazzling light as it smashed down fiercely. Seeing that the hammerhead was about to succeed, Tang Xiaoye spat out a mouthful of blood. The handkerchief-like spirit treasure stuck to the world-devouring beast's body completely dimmed and turned into powder. The world-devouring beast, who was no longer restrained, swung its tail and slammed heavily on the shadow of the giant hammer. When the giant hammer collapsed, Sun Yi was also sent flying. Who knew how many bones in his body were broken? The world-devouring beast had clearly lost its mind. Its flat body chased after the flying Sun Yi. The huge mouth on its abdomen opened and closed ferociously. Countless cultivators of the cool wind realm watched this scene in horror. They couldn't bear to look at it directly. Tang Xiaoye also exclaimed, "Senior brother's son." Sun Yi only felt cold all over. Seeing that a great disaster was about to happen, he wanted to dodge. However, the blow just now had paralyzed his entire body. His spiritual energy was extremely scattered. How could he still move? Just when he thought that he was going to die for sure, he saw a stream of light from the corner of his eye rushing towards him. Its speed was beyond his imagination. He didn't see clearly what it was. He only saw the stream of light pass by the furious world-devouring beast and pass by him. Vaguely, there was a flash of saber light. In the next moment, Sun Ye's eyes widened. All the cultivators of the cool wind realm who were watching this scene widened their eyes. For some reason, the ferocious world-devouring beast's body was suddenly split into two halves. The cut was neat and tidy. Blood spilled into the sky and its vitality was instantly annihilated. The entire realm fell into silence at this moment. Beside the abyss, Zhu Yu's heart was about to jump out of her chest. Her gaze followed the stream of light that had just shot out from her side until it stopped moving. No one knew what that stream of light was. Only she knew that it was a great cultivator of unknown origin passing by this realm. But how could he be so powerful? They were both great cultivators from the Qing Li Dao world. Even when they joined forces, they were still defeated by the ray fish creature and almost lost their lives. However, this great cultivator who had saved her had killed the ray fish creature with just a light blow. She didn't even see clearly how he did it. Glancing at Sun Yi, who was panting and palpitating, Lu Yi thought that he wasn't too late. When he saw that Sun Yi was in a bad situation, he hurriedly performed a technique to help in time. Otherwise, it would have been too late. At this moment, Sun Yi and Tang Xiaoye on the other side were looking at Lu Yi. They were surprised, shocked, and grateful. They were surprised because other than them, there were other constellations in the cool wind realm. Where did this person come from? He didn't look like a cultivator from the Qing Li Dao world. They were shocked because they were all constellations, but this person's strength was a little too terrifying. They were grateful for nothing other than the fact that Lu Yi had saved their lives. Moreover, it seemed that Lu Yi didn't have any ill intentions. Thinking about it, Sun Yi hurriedly cupped his hands. "Thank you for saving my life." Lu Yi nodded. "It's nothing." He could also see that the two of them could completely ignore the World Eater, but they were desperately trying to stop it. Obviously, they didn't want the World Eater to rush into the domain and cause any casualties to the living beings in this domain. In the end, the World Eater was so angry because of him. He asked again, "Only one?" According to the records in the Shiyuan Pavilion, if the Realm Eater came to pick up its offspring, it would come in pairs. It didn't make sense that there was only one here. Sun Yi hurriedly said, Senior brother Zhou lured the other one away. Senior brother Zhou may not be able to defeat it. Please help. Lu Yi came to a sudden realization, and in a flash, he shot towards the sky. After he left, Tang Xiaoye slowly flew over to join Sun Yi. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. With such strength, he must be from the Jade Conch Kingdom. The Jade Conch Kingdom's foundation is really strong. Our Qing Li Dao world can't compare to it. Sun Yi sighed and seemed a little disappointed. But I don't know what he's doing here. Tang Xiaoye looked worried. Logically speaking, this was a subordinate realm of the Qing Li Dao world. Its level wasn't high and it wasn't attractive to constellation cultivators. The appearance of the Jade Conch Kingdom's constellation here made people wonder. If the Jade Conch Kingdom wanted this realm, the Qing Li Dao world didn't have the strength to fight with them. On the other side, Lu Yi rushed into the Clear Wind Realm's near-space domain. He immediately saw a person fighting against an even larger World Eater. However, it seemed that the person wasn't a match for the World Eater. Although the World Eater wasn't as strong as Yu Yao, it was undoubtedly larger and stronger than the one he had just killed. The person was a middle-aged man who was at the late stage of constellation. He should be the so-called senior brother Zhou. Chapter 1565. At this time, Zhou Dingtian was secretly complaining. He originally wanted to lead the World Eater beast further away and then turn back to join the two constellations in this realm to kill the enemy. However, he could not get rid of it at all. Moreover, the other party suddenly became angry and rushed towards the Clear Wind realm. He was already somewhat powerless to stop it. In this way, he was about to close in on the Clear Wind realm. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation of spiritual power rapidly approaching from the direction of the Clear Wind realm. What surprised Zhou Dingtian was that the aura of the person who came was extremely unfamiliar. He stole a glance in that direction and saw an unfamiliar young man turning into a stream of light and approaching with a saber. Zhou Dingtian was at a loss for a moment. Who was this person? Why would he be in the Clear Wind realm? He was immediately overjoyed because no matter what this person's background was, he was still a human cultivator and someone he could communicate with. He immediately shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please come and help." But Lu Yi responded. His figure had already pounced in front of the World Eater beast. He easily dodged the other party's attack and spun the saber in his hand like a crescent moon. Zhou Dingnan suddenly felt his hair stand on end because he was shocked to realize that if this saber slashed at him, he would not be able to block it at all. Then his figure paused. His eyelids twitched as he looked at the originally furious World Eater beast. He clearly saw the look of horror in the World Eater beast's eyes. Its huge body froze for some reason. Then, a line of blood appeared in the center of its body. Its flat body was split into two just like that. Zhou Dingtian was completely dumbfounded and almost could not believe it. After being stunned for a while, he confirmed that the World Eater beast that he could not stop at all was actually cut in half by a saber. He looked at Lu Yi and carefully sensed the spiritual power fluctuations on Lu Ye's body. He confirmed that it was only at the level of the late constellation realm. For a moment, he felt as if he was in a dream. Lu Yi had already arrived in front of the World Eater beast's corpse with his saber. After searching for a while, he found a fist-sized crystal core from the huge corpse. He crushed the crystal core of the small World Eater beast under the magma, replenishing the Clear Wind realm's lost foundation. However, he wanted to keep the large World Eater beast's crystal core. This thing was not cheap. He could bring it back to the 9 states and give it to Little Nine. He had already taken out the crystal core of the World Eater beast he killed in the Clear Wind realm. "Fellow Taoist, are you all right?" Lu Yi looked at Zhou Dingtian, who was still in a daze. Zhou Dingtian regained his senses and quickly said, "I'm fine. Thank you for your help." Suddenly he remembered, "Oh right, there's another one in the bounded domain. Don't worry, fellow Taoist. That one is already dead," Lu Yi comforted. Only then did Zhou Dingtian relax. When he thought about it, it made sense. That person had come from the realm zone. If he could kill the World Eater on his side with one saber strike, then the one in the realm zone would not have a good ending. However, Fellow Taoist, your junior martial brother and junior martial sister seem to be heavily injured. Fellow Taoist, you'd better go take a look. Zhou Dingtian's heart tightened when he heard this. He hurriedly flew into the bounded domain. After flying for a while, he turned back and said, "If there's nothing urgent, my friend, please don't leave in a hurry. After we're done with the matters in this realm, we'll bring our junior brothers and sisters to thank you." Lu Yi nodded slightly. There's no hurry. He was waiting for the people from the Qing Li Daoist world to come. Now that they were here, of course he would not leave at this time. Zhou Dingtian and Lu Yi returned to the Clear Wind realm one after another. The former went to look for his injured junior brothers and sisters, while Lu Yi went straight back to the Clear Wind City. In the Clear Wind City, there was a huge uproar. Many cultivators saw the shocking battle in the sky clearly. However, the highest-level cultivators in this realm were only in the True Lake realm. Hence, no one knew what exactly happened. They only knew that some of the cultivators from the upper realms seemed to be injured, and that some of them displayed their power and killed a beast that they had never seen before. Everyone was talking about it, but they could not come to a conclusion. Lu Yi found Li Shang and Ye. The adult and the child were still wandering around, looking very excited. When Lu Yi found them, Li Shang was bringing Ye to a tea house to eat delicacies unique to this realm. Ye's mouth was full of oil and Li Shang was wiping her mouth. "You're in the limelight," Li Shang glanced at him and joked. "Since we've met, we can't just sit back and do nothing." Lu Yi played with the 2 crystal cores of the World Eater in his hands, feeling the mysterious energy contained in them. He vaguely felt that he had forgotten something, but he could not remember it. Ye held a bowl and used a spoon to scoop something like a glutinous rice ball and brought it to Lu Ye's mouth. "Father, it's delicious." Lu Yi ate one and found it delicious. He called the waiter and served another bowl. He tasted it carefully. There were even storytellers and opera singers in the tea house. It was very lively. In the evening, 3 people walked into the small tea house and went straight to where Lu Yi was. The leader, Zhou Dingtian, held his fist and bowed. "I'm Zhou Dingtian from the Divine Martial Palace of the Qing Li Daoist world. Greetings, fellow cultivator." The man and woman behind him also saluted and introduced themselves one after another. Sun Yi was from the Baimang Mountain, and Tang Xiaoye was from the Green Flower Pond. The Green Flower Pond, the Baimang Mountain, and the Divine Martial Palace were the 3 top sects of the Qing Li Daoist world. Each of them had a Yu Yao in charge. However, after a shocking incident a few years ago, only Wu Zhua of the Divine Martial Palace was left. Qin Yuandai of the Baimang Mountain died somewhere, and Tang Jun of the Green Flower Pond was missing. It could be said that when the news spread that year, the entire Qing Li Daoist world was disheartened. Many people guessed that it was the Jade Conch realm who did it because the only large realm they knew was Jade Conch, and Jade Conch had such power. Unfortunately, no one dared to ask. Now that Zhou Dingtian and the others met Lu Yi here, they thought that he was a cultivator from Jade Conch. Even if he had saved their lives before, they could not help but be wary. However, a favor was still a favor. No matter what, they had to thank him in person and find out Lu Ye's intentions at the same time. After hearing the 3 of them introduce themselves, Lu Yi could not help but look at Tang Xiaoye. This woman's surname was Tang, and she came from the Green Flower Pond. If he was not mistaken, she should be one of Tang Jun's descendants. The old man had lived for thousands of years. His cultivation level was not very high, but he should have no problem having many descendants. He stood up and bowed. "Lu Yi of the 9 heavens." "The 9 heavens?" Zhou Dingtian was stunned. When he found Sun Yi and Tang Xiaoye, he heard that they guessed that Lu Yi was a cultivator from Jade Conch, so he thought so too. He did not expect that Lu Yi was not a cultivator, but came from a place called the 9 heavens realm. The 3 of them looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. No one had heard of the 9 heavens realm. "Brother, are you from another galaxy?" Zhou Dingtian asked. Lu Yi shook his head. "The 9 heavens is in Jade Conch. It is not strange that you have not heard of it, because the 9 heavens realm became a large realm less than 10 years ago." "I see." Zhou Dingtian was enlightened. If it was a newly formed large realm, then it was possible. Although they were constellations, They did not dare to say that they knew everything about Jade Conch Galaxy. There were too many places that they had not explored. Tang Xiaoya was puzzled. Brother, you said that the Nine Heavens realm became a large realm less than 10 years ago, but I see that your cultivation is already at the late stage of constellation. Logically speaking, a newly formed realm should not have been able to nurture constellations for less than 10 years. Even if their strength had grown, it should not have grown so quickly. Lu Ye's cultivation and what he said clearly contradicted each other. I did not cultivate in the Nine Heavens. I went to other places these years, so I could improve so quickly. Lu Yi casually explained. Zhou Dingtian and the others were still wondering what kind of place it was that could allow one's cultivation to improve so quickly. Then, they heard Lu Yi say, Junior sister, you are brother Tang Jun's descendant, right? Tang Xiaoya was stunned and looked at Lu Yi suspiciously. Brother, you know great ancestor? Lu Yi nodded. Thanks to brother Tang, we became friends despite our age difference. I have been with brother Tang all these years. Tang Xiaoya's eyes suddenly brightened. She asked anxiously, Brother, where is my great ancestor? Does he well? The Green Flower Pool always knew that Tang Jun was still alive because his soul lamp was not extinguished. However, they did not know where he was. Even if they guessed that Tang Jun was imprisoned in the Jade Conch world, they did not dare to verify it. Now that she heard Lu Ye's words, Tang Xiaoya suddenly realized that her sex guesses were wrong. Great ancestor was not in the Jade Conch world now, but in a place they did not know. Brother Tang is well. Even his lifespan has increased. He is living a comfortable life every day. You don't have to worry. Tang Xiaoya heaved a sigh of relief. That's great. Tang Jun was the anchor of the Green Flower Pool. During his disappearance, the Green Flower Pool could be said to be in a state of panic. Now that they knew that Tang Jun was not dead and his lifespan had increased, their worries were swept away. Tang Xiaoya could not wait to return to the Green Lidao world and tell the good news to the people of the Green Flower Pool. After calming down, Tang Xiaoya said, Brother, can you tell me where great ancestor is? How can I find him? Brother Tang Jun's current location is extremely far away. Even if I tell you, you won't be able to find him. Hearing this, Tang Xiaoya's expression darkened. Then he changed the subject. However, I'm here to bring some cultivators with me. Before that though, I'd like to pay a visit to fellow Taoist Wu Zhuo. I'll have to trouble the three of you to lead the way. Zhou Dingnan pondered for a moment and said, Brother, you can pay a visit to the Hallmaster. However, it will take some time to get to the Green Lidao world. No problem, I can wait. It had been such a long journey. Since they had returned to their galaxy, it would not take long to get to the Green Lidao world. After that, Zhou Dingtian warmly invited Lu Yi to stay in the Green Li Palace. Lu Yi followed the host's lead. The Green Li Palace was specially built by the Clear Wind Realm as a place for the great cultivators of the upper world to rest. It was only opened once every 10 years. Usually, no one was allowed to come close. When it was opened, the maids selected in the palace were all the most beautiful and outstanding female disciples of the various sections. It could be said that this palace had gathered the best female cultivators in the Clear Wind Realm for the past 10 years. Chapter 1566. The Qingli Palace occupied a huge area and was a cluster of palaces not far from the Qingfeng city. Compared to the quiet Qingli Palace, the Qingfeng city was much livelier. The cultivators from the upper bound would not stay for long and would usually depart within 10 days. However, there was news that the cultivators would leave the Qingfeng world the next day. Obviously, they were in a hurry to return to the upper bound. No one knew why, because nothing like this had ever happened before. Zhou Dingtian and the others did not want to go back so soon. After all, they were tired from the journey and needed a rest. However, the information that Lu Yi revealed to them was unusual. Especially Tang Xiaoya, who could not wait to go back to the Qingli world. How could she be in the mood to stay? Tang Xiaoya and Sun Yi had not recovered from their injuries and were recuperating. Zhou Dingtian had too many doubts and took the initiative to visit Lu Yi to find out more information. However, Lu Yi did not say too much because it was meaningless to tell Zhou Dingtian the details. When he returned to the Qingli world and met Wu Zhuo, he only needed to show Wu Zhuo the jade slip that Tang Jun gave him and everything would be clear. The Qingli world still needed Wu Zhuo to be the master. After all, Zhou Dingtian was just a constellation. A female cultivator dressed as a maid was ordered to serve spiritual fruits and wine. Lu Yi did not care at first, but when he saw Zhu Yu, his eyes suddenly twitched. He finally remembered what he had forgotten during the day. He left Zhu Yu beside the abyss and forgot to bring her back. He felt a little apologetic. A few thousand miles was nothing to him, but flying back from a real lake took some effort. If he was not mistaken, when he took Zhu Yu away, she was about to participate in the competition. Zhu Yu was about to leave after serving the spiritual fruits when she heard Lu Yi ask, "How was the competition?" Zhu Yu was stunned for a moment before she realized that Lu Yi was talking to her. She looked nervous and quickly lowered her head to reply, "Master, the time was wrong, so I forfeited." She didn't know how terrifying Lu Ye's cultivation was before, so she wasn't too nervous when facing Lu Yi. But after seeing Lu Ye's power, she didn't dare to overstep her boundaries. Moreover, it was the honor of her sect to be dispatched here to serve as superior cultivator. If she didn't do well and angered the superior cultivator, it would implicate the entire sect. "What a pity," Lu Yi said. Zhu Yu respectfully withdrew. Zhou Dingtian asked with interest, "You know this lady?" Lu Yi then casually explained to Zhou Dingtian about how she had caught Zhu Yu's able-bodied man. Only then did Zhou Dingtian understand that Zhu Yu had missed the time of the grand competition because of Lu Yi. Zhou Dingtian did not manage to get too much information from Lu Yi, so he could only leave. Anyway, no matter what Lu Ye's purpose was, since he was going to the Qingli Dao world, he would know when he met the hall master. The next day, outside the Greenly Palace, all the sect leaders of the major sects of the Clear Wind realm gathered. They looked at the spirit vessel hovering in front of the palace with reverence. Below the spirit boat, there were 30 people waiting excitedly. These 30 people were the winners of this grand competition and were about to enter the Qingli Dao world to cultivate. The 30 people stood in 3 rows. The 10 true lake realm cultivators were still okay. After all, their cultivation was higher and they were calmer. The Ling Shi and Yunhe realms were more lively. They stood there proudly. Some of the braver ones even looked up to admire the mystery of the spirit boat. Every time this happened, the elders of their sects would secretly admonish them, telling them to behave. After waiting for a long time, the gate of the Greenly Palace opened and a group of people walked out. The sect leaders all looked serious and bowed respectfully. They shouted in unison, "Welcome, superior cultivator." Zhou Dingtian and Lu Yi walked side by side in the front. Tang Xiaoye and Sun Yi followed behind. Beside Tang Xiaoye was Li Shang, who was carrying Yaya. "Brother Lu, please." Zhou Dingtian gestured as they walked to the front of the star boat. Lu Yi did not decline. He stepped forward and landed on the boat. Zhou Dingtian and the rest followed closely behind. Sun Yi did not get on the boat. He looked at the 30 people. Under their burning gazes, he said, "Everyone is here. Let's get on the boat." The true lake realm cultivators activated their spiritual energy and wrapped the Ling Shi cultivators beside them. They landed on the star boat. The Yunhe realm's cultivators were self-reliant. The star boat was not very tall, so it was not difficult to fly up. In the blink of an eye, all 30 people were on the boat. The group of sect leaders below all revealed gratified expressions. Those cultivators who didn't make it into the top 10 were naturally envious. Zhou Dingtian walked to the front of the deck and looked down. He suddenly said, "Where is Zhu Yu of the Xingyang sect?" On the Xingyang sect's side, Sect Master Zhu Shang was shocked when he heard that. He hurriedly looked at Zhu Yu, wondering if she had done something wrong. Otherwise, why would a great cultivator from the upper world suddenly call her name? Zhu Yu was also confused. However, she answered and bowed. "Zhu Yu is here." Zhou Dingtian looked at her and smiled. "I am Zhu Yu of the Xingyang sect. You helped kill the beasts and protected the peace of a realm. However, you missed the time of the competition. Since your cultivation is good, I will allow you to follow me to the Qingli Dao world to cultivate. Are you willing to go?" Zhu Yu was stunned. It was true that she had missed the time of the competition. However, she had never helped kill the beasts and protected the peace of her realm. At most, she had only told Lu Yi a little information when he brought her. She thought that she would have to wait for another 10 years after missing the competition. Who would have thought that there would be such a light at the end of the tunnel? She suddenly remembered that the superior cultivator from the upper worlds asked her about the results of the competition last night. At that time, he did not say much, so she did not think much about it. She immediately understood that the superior cultivator from the upper worlds made an exception to bring her to the upper worlds. It was the result of the superior cultivator's casual question. "What are you waiting for?" She heard Zhu Shang's anxious voice. Zhu Shang saw that she was in a daze and hurried to remind her. Zhu Yu also came back to her senses. She quickly said, "I am willing to go." This was her goal. How could she miss it? Zhou Dingtian smiled and raised his hand. "If that's the case, then get on the ship." Zhu Yu looked back at Zhu Shang. Under Zhu Shang's urging gaze, she jumped hard and landed on the ship. Next, Zhou Dingtian gave a few words of encouragement to the clan masters of this world. He reminded them to cultivate their own cultivators carefully and asked them to send more talented people to the Qingli Dao world. A group of clan masters agreed and gave him many cultivation resources, which earned the gratitude of everyone. After a while, the ship shook and slowly rose into the sky. On the deck, the 31 cultivators of the Clear Wind realm, including Zhu Yu, knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the bottom. Although going to the upper worlds was the only way out for the cultivators of the Clear Wind realm, and it was the goal of almost all cultivators, this could be a permanent separation. If they wanted to return to the Clear Wind realm, they had to cultivate to the Constellation realm. After so many years, the Clear Wind realm had sent many talents to the Qingli Dao world. But how many of them could cultivate to the Constellation realm and return home? There were many obstacles in the path of cultivation. If one could not overcome any of them, they could die. The star boat rose into the sky and left. After a long time, the sect masters and sects that had gathered here slowly dispersed. The next time the Light Wind realm would be so lively would be 10 years later. The 31 cultivators of the Clear Wind realm were arranged in different cabins. It would take about 2 months to reach the Qingli Dao world. Of course, that was the time it would take Zhou Dingtian and the others to sail their starboats. If Lu Yi were to sail his starboat alone, it would only take him a month. His starboat was much better than Zhou Dingtian's in all aspects. However, he did not intend to rush them. He usually cultivated in his cabin. After all, it was only a month. Now that they had returned to the Jade Snail Galaxy, there was no need to rush. Yaya could not stay idle. She ran around the ship all day, and Li Shang followed behind her like an old mother. It was very tiring. Tang Xiaoya wanted to visit Lu Yi several times to find out more about Tang Jun, but she did not have the chance. She had no choice but to give up. The journey was peaceful. About 2 months later, they arrived at the Qingli Dao world. On the deck, Lu Yi and Zhou Dingtian stood side by side and looked at the world in front of them. A large world like the Qingli Dao world, which had been promoted for thousands of years, was undoubtedly more magnificent than the Clear Wind realm. Even if one did not go deep into the world, one could see some clues just by looking at the starry sky. There were very few Yu Yao in the Qingli Dao world. Now, there was only one Wu Zhuo in the world. However, there were still many constellations. As early as a month ago, they could see some cultivators of constellations active in the starry sky. Sometimes, these cultivators who were searching for spiritual jades in the starry sky would come to the ship to greet Zhou Dingtian and the others. This happened more frequently the closer they were to the Qingli Dao world. Now that they were approaching the world, they could see traces of cultivators going in and out of the clouds from time to time. When they entered the world, the ship landed directly on a spiritual island in the vast sea. According to Zhou Dingtian, the spiritual island was where the Divine Martial Hall was located. Since Lu Yi wanted to visit Wu Zhuo, he naturally had to go to the Divine Martial Hall first. The ship landed on a huge square on the spiritual island. Lu Yi was looking around when he suddenly felt a strong divine thought from a certain direction on the spiritual island. Lu Yi quickly looked in that direction and saw a spiritual mountain that stood like a sword. There was a tall tower on the peak. The divine thought came from the tower. Wuzhua. Lu Yi immediately identified the owner of the divine thought. In the entire Qingli Dao world, there was only one Yu Yao. It matched the information given by Tang Jun. Wuzhua was also a mid-stage Yu Yao. The divine thought was obviously checking on Lu Yi. After all, no matter which world a strange cultivator came to, the owner of the world would be concerned. Lu Yi saluted in that direction and said loudly, "I am Lu Ye of the 9 heavens. I am here to visit you." The divine sense was originally just probing, but after hearing Lu Ye's words, it suddenly became much heavier and a vigorous voice came from the tower. "You want to be my friend and discuss the Tao? That depends on whether or not you have the qualifications." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden wave of power from the tower. Then, a huge handprint appeared out of nowhere and pressed towards the ship. Chapter 1567. There were many established rules in the starry sky. These rules were not man-made, but rather the natural evolution of countless years of development. For example, if there was no special relationship between cultivators, they could refer to each other as fellow Taoists. After all, cultivators were a rather special group. They did not determine seniority by age, but by cultivation. Of course, that was the case. But if a cultivator insisted on referring to them as fellow Taoists after meeting the sun, it would not end well for them. Thus, how they addressed each other would depend on the situation. If Lu Yi had come to visit Wuzhua on his own, it would not have mattered if he addressed Wuzhua as senior. However, this time, Wuzhua was not just representing him. Although he would not lose anything by addressing Wuzhua as senior, it would likely hinder their cooperation in the future. However, it was clear that Wuzhua was displeased with the way he addressed Wuzhua. His palm strike was so powerful that it shook the heavens and the earth. The cultivators from the clear wind plane on the planetary ship turned pale with fright. Even Zhou Dingtian and the others had grim expressions on their faces. When they looked up, they saw a palm print that covered the sky, and the lines on the palm print were clearly visible. As the palm strike approached, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Strangely, the huge palm print rapidly shrank as it approached. It originally blocked everyone's vision, but it quickly shrank to the size of an ordinary palm and slowly pressed towards Lu Ye's chest. The pressure on everyone else dissipated, but on Lu Ye's side, not only did it not lessen, it actually became heavier. Wuzhua had no intention of killing, otherwise his palm would not have been so slow. He probably only wanted to teach Lu Yi a simple lesson and let him know that he could not say anything he wanted. Facing this palm strike, Lu Yi stood quietly at the bow of the ship, not moving at all, as if he had been scared witless. Only when the palm print was about to reach him did he suddenly throw a jade slip forward. A faint aura pulsed from the jade slip. Wuzhua's surprised voice suddenly rang out from the tall tower. He felt a sense of familiarity from the jade slip. The palm imprint that was about to strike Lu Ye's chest suddenly grabbed the jade slip and quickly retreated back into the tower. The sky was clear, and the starboat was completely silent. Almost everyone was still immersed in the terrifying might of Yu Yao's expert. Only Lu Ye's clothes fluttered in the wind. A short moment later, the pagoda trembled slightly, and then a ray of light shot out from within the pagoda, transforming into something that looked like a rainbow bridge that connected the pagoda and the starboat. Wuzhua's voice rang out again, but it was no longer as dignified as before. "Fellow Taoist, please come in." Zhou Dingtian was dumbfounded. He was a member of the Divine Martial Hall and a direct disciple of Wuzhua. He knew his master's temper very well. As one of the 3 Yueyao of this realm, Wuzhua could be said to be the strongest person in the entire Qingli Dao world. He was also the pillar of the realm and the hope for the future. His master was very ambitious. Even Yu Yao from Jade Conch was nothing in his eyes. His master was confident that in the future, he would be even stronger than Yu Yao from Jade Conch. Lu Ye's greeting of fellow Taoist had undoubtedly made his master unhappy. However, in the blink of an eye, his master had actually acknowledged him as fellow Taoist, and his tone was so polite. Zhou Dingtian really wanted to know what exactly was written in the jade slip that could make his proud and arrogant master have such an obvious change in attitude. "Thank you for your hospitality," Lu Yi said. She turned to Li Shang and told her to wait for her here. Then, she stepped toward the Rainbow Bridge and walked step by step toward the tall tower. The Rainbow Bridge was connected to the top floor of the tall tower. When Lu Yi arrived, she immediately saw a tall and sturdy man with long hair draped over his shoulders. He wore a black robe and stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. Lu Yi had always heard of Wu Zhu's name from Tang Jun, but this was the first time she saw him in person. Similar to what she had imagined, Wu Zhu's aura was extremely wild and flamboyant, like an ancient ferocious beast that had gained intelligence. Lu Yi had seen many Yu Yao before and had even killed one with his own hands. However, those Yu Yao gave Lu Yi a completely different feeling from the one in front of him. He could faintly sense that Wu Zhu's strength was most likely at the peak of the intermediate Yu Yao stage. He vaguely remembered Tang Jun mentioning that Wu Zhu had once participated in the battle for the spirit sea of the reincarnation tree and won. He had also obtained divine light from the Alpha origin stage and was promoted to a constellation. No matter which era, those who could win the battle for the spirit sea of the reincarnation tree were by no means ordinary. It should be said that the battle was a battle between the elite spirit sea experts from thousands of large and even top domains. In the end, only the top 100 could win. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was. Wu Zhu's victory was already proof of his aptitude. Such a person's strength was far superior to those of the same cultivation level no matter which cultivation level he was at. There was an avatar of the reincarnation tree in the Qingli Dao world, which Lu Yi found strange in the past. As far as he knew, Tang Jun and Qin Yuandai were the first batch of constellations in the Qingli Dao world. However, these two had never left the Jade Snail Galaxy, so it was naturally impossible for them to go to the reincarnation tree to ask for an avatar. Actually, Tang Jun did not know where this avatar came from. This avatar tree seemed to have originally existed in the Qingli Dao world. It was only after he and Qin Yuandai ascended to the constellation that they gradually noticed the abnormality of this avatar tree. After some research, they finally understood its function. Tang Jun speculated that this avatar had existed in the Dao world of Qingli for a very long time. Perhaps in the ancient times, the Dao world of Qingli was already a large realm. Later on, for some unknown reason, it declined and only rose again more than 3,000 years ago. The rise and fall of realms was a common occurrence in the starry sky and was not surprising at all. On the top floor of the tower, Wu Zhu quietly looked at Lu Yi. His eyes were deep and unfathomable. Although he didn't show it on his face, his heart was filled with shock. Because in that short period of time just now, he'd obtained too much unbelievable information from the Jade Slip. The source of the information was Tang Jun, who had been missing for many years. He was certain that the information in the Jade Slip was imprinted by Tang Jun. It couldn't be fake. After all, they were Yu Yao from the same realm and knew each other very well. No one could deceive him in this regard. The mysterious insect path, the myriad phenomenon galaxy, the magnificent myriad phenomenon sea, the flourishing unparalleled island, and the constellation palace where millions of constellations gathered together, all kinds of information impacted Wu Zhu's spirit sea. Even if he was an intermediate Yu Yao, he couldn't remain indifferent. Compared to the magnificent and lively Wanxiang Sea, Jade Conch was simply a remote and desolate place. It would have been fine if he was someone who respected the small, but the outside world had nothing to do with him. Wouldn't he be happy if he stayed in his own land and lived a carefree life? After all, how could he not have some ambition when he won the Alpha origin stage? Therefore, he was very interested in the various information in the Jade Slip. However, there was one thing that Wu Zhu didn't understand. Tang Jun had left a message in the Jade Slip, telling him that if a boy who called himself Li Taibai came to him with the Jade Slip one day, he must treat him with courtesy and must not neglect him. This was because the island master of Wushuang Island, where he was staying, had a very good relationship with Li Taibai. He was able to enter Wushuang Island because of Li Taibai. In the future, if people from the Qingli Dao world really entered the Wanxiang Sea, they would have to rely on him. If he offended him now, there would be no way out for the Qingli Dao world in the future. The person Tang Jun mentioned was called Li Taibai, and the Spirit Island was also called Wushuang Island. Li Taibai had a very good relationship with the island master of Wushuang Island, so one couldn't help but make the connection. But when Wu Zhuo thought carefully, the person who came just now seemed to call himself Lu Ye of the Nine Heavens. He couldn't figure it out, so he simply asked, "Who is Li Taibai?" Lu Yi pondered for a while and knew what was going on. He had always called himself Li Taibai in front of Tang Jun, so he said calmly, "It's also me. The Wushuang domain is a domain of the Nine Heavens. As for the name Li Taibai, you should know. How can one not be attacked when one is in the galaxy? It's inevitable that one would have to use an alias." He admitted it so calmly that Wu Zhuo was stunned. He nodded slightly to show that he understood, but he couldn't help but have some doubts. Was Tang Jun reliable or not? He didn't even know the real identity of the other party and only knew the alias Li Taibai. This didn't seem very reliable. "Let's sit down and talk." Wu Zhuo gestured and took a seat first. There were no tables or chairs in the tower, only 2 futons. Wu Zhuo sat on one, so Lu Yi could only sit on the other. The two of them sat facing each other. Wu Zhuo had many things he wanted to ask, but he didn't know where to start. After thinking for a while, he said, "According to senior brother Tang, you and he accidentally fell into a newly formed insect path and ended up in the Wanxiang galaxy?" "That's right." Lu Yi nodded. Lu Yi didn't check the contents of the jade slip. Firstly, he felt that it was unnecessary. Secondly, the jade slip used to transmit information definitely had some special restrictions. If Lu Yi finished checking it, the jade slip would definitely be destroyed. He wouldn't be able to bring it back to Wu Zhuo to gain his trust and cooperation. That was the day senior brother Tang went missing. "Have you seen the other Yu Yao of the Dao world?" Wu Zhuo asked again. All these years, one of the 3 Yu Yao of the Greenly Dao world had died and gone missing. He was the only one left to support the Dao world. As a result, he didn't even have the time to enter the galaxy to search for cultivation resources. Although it was confirmed that Qin Yuandai was dead and that a group of star mansions on the 100 Meng Mountain had died, nobody knew exactly how and where they had died. After all, none of the people Qin Yuandai had brought out had returned alive. Wu Zhuo had only asked casually and didn't expect to get any answers from Lu Yi. Unexpectedly, Lu Yi nodded. Wu Zhuo was stunned. "Where did you see her? What was the situation at that time? Was there an evil enemy chasing after her?" Lu Yi looked at him and said, "Daoist, you want to know how Yu Yao died, right?" Wu Zhuo looked surprised. "Do you know how she died?" "Of course. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.